All right, may be seated. Your next question or redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Spiegel, you were asked about whether you were able to examine Mr. Depp. Do you recall those questions back and forth?
Yes.
And so if I understand your testimony, you asked twice for Mr. Depp to be interviewed by you, correct?
Yes.
Objection leading.
And
Overruled.
And then, in addition to that, Ms. Heard requested twice of the court for Mr. Depp to be submitting to an examination of you, correct?
Yes.
And those were denied, correct?
Yes.
And now Mr. Depp is contending that it's unethical for you to provide an opinion in this case because you didn't get an opportunity to interview him. Do you think that makes sense?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'll sustain the objection.
All right. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding of it.
Okay. Yes. Now, when counsel for Mr. Depp was reading to you the Goldwater rule, there were two words that he kind of went over pretty quickly, and I'm going to go over them again with you a little bit slower. And that was that the Goldwater rule was that you cannot make an armchair diagnosis, right?
Objection.
Based on, quote,
Okay.
publicly available records. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the records that you reviewed in this case were private, were they not?
Yes.
And in fact, Dr. Blaustein's records were marked confidential, correct?
Yes.
And his deposition was marked confidential?
Yes.
Okay. And Dr. Kipper's records were all marked confidential?
Yes.
Objection leading.
And
I'll sustain.
okay, what if any labeling was there on Dr. Kipper's deposition?
All the documents I reviewed were confidential, and I also signed the confidentiality agreement, so everything I looked at was confidential.
Okay. So that, in fact, does not even comport, that doesn't meet the restrictions that were put.
Objection leading.
I mean, so would it be fair to say that you have not, have you rendered any opinions in this case as an expert witness based on publicly available records?
I have not rendered any opinion based on any publicly available records.
Thank you. Now, you were asked a number of questions about narcissistic traits and your diagnosis or findings that Mr. Depp exhibited narcissistic traits or had that disorder. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
All right. And the question was asked of you of the whether if you have 5 of 9 narcissistic traits. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Now, one of the ones you testified before was for narcissism, it requires admiration, correct?
Yes.
What, if any, record evidence was there that Mr. Depp requires admiration?
The very people that surround him need to admire him, or they're no longer in his employment or his working circle.
Okay. The second one that you discussed was sense of entitlement. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
All right. What record evidence is there that Mr. Depp exhibits behavior of needing a sense of entitlement?
So, again, thinking that Ms. Heard was marrying him solely for his money and his influence, and that was the case, was, in my opinion, very entitled.
All right. And the third one you discussed was exploitative. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the record evidence that Mr. Depp exhibits behaviors that are exploitative?
Again, I think the whole concept of abuse is exploitative.
Okay. The fourth one was lacks empathy. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And what is the record evidence that Mr. Depp exhibits lacking empathy?
To be able to commit intimate partner violence and the control you have over someone.
I'm sorry?
Can I be heard?
Okay.
I'm just going to ask you to give the record evidence of Mr. Depp's lacking empathy that you know of.
Yes. Am I allowed to elaborate?
Yes, just
Okay.
just a little different than what you said before.
Okay. So, if one does, so I'll make it more direct. So if you're not agreeing with what Mr. Depp has to say, you are no longer useful. Okay, therefore, you don't really care about others for others. You care about others for your benefit. So, off and on dismissing Dr. Kipper, for Dr. Kipper setting some boundaries on substance use protocol, substance detox, is an example of lacking empathy and not really caring what other people have to say.
All right. Another one of the characteristics that you cited was envious. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
What is the record evidence that Mr. Depp exhibits envy?
I think jealousy is a good start for that. I think that Ms. Heard wanting to have a career, start with that, beyond what she has, and the jealousy parts of with Mr. Franco and I think others commented this week. Last week Ms. Burstyn commented about things about jealousy. So I think it's pretty apparent.
Okay. And the next one you listed was fragile self-esteem. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
And what is the record evidence of Mr. Depp exhibiting that?
So fragile self-esteem would be more along the line of a cluster B trait. I should put that in. It's not necessarily the criteria for narcissism, so it's a trait. And basically what that means will be that the combination of poor self-control and rapid mood states is fragile self-esteem, fragile personality, so traits. So it would go in the line of cluster B rather than per se narcissistic.
All right. Now, we've seen Mr. Depp during this trial doodling and eating candy. What, if any, evidence would that suggest that he has narcissistic traits?
Objection, Your Honor. No foundation.
I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. Now, you were asked about the cluster B, and counsel for Mr. Depp came back and said, are you aware Ms. Heard has been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder? Now, you reviewed, I think you testified at the beginning, you reviewed the therapy and counseling and medical records for Ms. Heard, correct?
Correct.
What, if any, evidence was there that Bonnie Jacobs diagnosed Amber Heard with either borderline personality or histrionic personality disorder?
Objection, Your Honor.
That's fair, Cross. He asked the question. That's fair. Redirect.
It's beyond the scope.
It's not,
Overruled.
Thank you.
So if I could start, Ms. Jacobs demonstrated no type of personality disorder, borderline or otherwise. And on a review of Dr. Currien's records.
Objection beyond the scope of the question.
I'll ask each of them separately. And you also reviewed the therapy records for Ms. Heard for Colonel Cowan, correct?
Yes.
What, if any, evidence was there at any time that he diagnosed Amber Heard with borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder?
Not only did he not, he referred to Mr. Depp as a narcissist too.
Okay. Now, you also reviewed all of Dawn Hughes' records and her testing, correct?
Yes.
And what, if any, evidence did you find in any of that extensive testing and note-taking that she had found that Amber Heard had borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder?
Objection leading.
What, if any?
Overruled.
None.
Okay. And you also reviewed Dr. Curry's notes and her testing, correct?
Yes.
All right. And what, if any, evidence did you find in any of Dr. Curry's testing that Amber Heard had either borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder?
She had traits she did not meet the full, on her own evaluation, she did not have the full endorse enough criteria to meet the criteria for borderline personality disorder and or histrionic personality disorder. She definitely had traits. She did not have the disorder by going by the strict number of criteria.
All right. Now, you mentioned in response to Mr. Depp's counsel's questions, you started to talk about battered wife syndrome. What is your experience with battered wife syndrome sometimes being mistaken with borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder?
Objection compound and leading.
Overruled.
So battered wife syndrome, which is more subsyndromal or not quite PTSD, has so many symptoms of PTSD. And if you hear some of them, you'll see why someone might think that. They do have reliving experiences feeling as if the abuse is happening, even if it's not, upon reminders of abuse, such as getting ready to use something, getting ready to use a substance or something along that line. They do have hyperarousal. They do have hypervigilance, which is very easily mistaken for the emotional reactivity of borderline personality disorder. They do have avoidance symptoms, so they avoid emotions, activities, people, and if that can't be happening, they start becoming much more anxious, much more hyper-aroused. They have disturbances in relationships, which clearly can be an issue. Intimacy problems, again, which could also resemble borderline personality disorder. So those description and traits that were there, A, did not meet the full criteria for borderline, and B, could readily easily be explained by Bader-Weiss syndrome, a form of PTSD.
Thank you. Now, you also indicated earlier that you reviewed the deposition of Amy Banks, correct?
Yes.
And what, if any, determinations did you make based on her deposition from her meetings with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard?
So Dr. Banks is a professor at Harvard, the leading institution in America for medical schools, who's an expert on intimate partner violence. She had a chance to meet them in relationship counseling.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive.
That's not non-responsive. I said, what, if anything, did she find?
Sustained.
All right. Tell the jury about Amy Banks, the significance of Amy Banks.
So what Dr. Banks found was that she fully believed Ms. Heard's version of what was going on.
Objection, hearsay.
I reversed those. Let me do it again. Please tell the jury.
Sustain the objection.
Please tell the jury what about the qualifications of Dr. Amy Banks. This is the one who saw both Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp.
Dr. Banks is a professor at, I don't know whether it's assistant associate professor at Harvard University Medical School, one, if not one of the two top medical schools in the world, who specialize in intimate partner violence. She is, above all people, who understand if someone is victim, perpetrator, because she does this, researches this for a living every day. And that's her qualifications. Can I say what she reported?
Then I'm going to ask you, what, if anything, did Dr. Banks indicate relating to histrionic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder for Ms. Heard?
Dr. Banks didn't mention anything about personality disorder at all. What she did mention was whom she felt gave a more accurate version of...
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
That's a credibility testimony.
I think he can testify to that.
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay. What, if anything, did Dr. Banks report, not saying what the ultimate conclusion was, what, if anything, did Dr. Banks say about what was reported to her by Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp and how they responded?
So Ms. Heard discussed in trying to, again, as a victim, trying to save the relationship, discussed with Dr. Banks these accusations, these facts of intimate partner violence. Mr. Depp.
Objection, hearsay.
I think he's entitled to rely on hearsay, and he's not giving what ultimately was. He's entitled to it. That's my.
You can rely on hearsay, but you just can't state the hearsay. So you can rely on it.
All right. What, if anything, did Mr. Depp do in response?
Mr. Depp said nothing when Ms. Heard accused him of intimate partner violence. Mr. Depp said nothing.
And what is the significance
Objection,
of that?
hearsay.
I'll sustain the objection.
All right. And what is the significance of that?
The significance of that is with...
Objection, no foundation.
Sustain.
Okay. All right. We'll move on. You were asked about MDMA and what the impact could potentially be of taking 8 to 10 of these pills. Do you recall?
Yes.
Okay. And now I'm going to take you to Australia 2015. You've reviewed testimony over that, right, from Mr. Depp, Ms. Heard,
Yes.
and a number. Okay. Do you recall that Ms. Heard also said that she found dime bags of cocaine in drawers at the end of that 3 days?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, Michelle, can you bring up 1828, it's already in evidence. And if we could publish that, okay, we can, thank you. This is one of the pictures that was taken in Australia, and the testimony's been that these two canvases of Ms. Heard's were painted completely over. Is that something that could be the impact of having 8 to 10 tablets of MDMA and combining that with cocaine and alcohol?
Objection, no foundation. Speculation.
The foundation's already been laid, Your Honor.
No, sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay. What, if anything, if you look at the painted canvases on this one, what, if any, evidence is that reflecting behaviors indicative of taking a lot of MDMA, cocaine, and alcohol?
Objection, speculation, no foundation.
It's the same question. Sustained.
You testified earlier about property, destruction of property. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell the jury how that relates to the correlating factors of risk factors for IPV?
Again, destruction of property is a form of psychological abuse, psychological mistreatment. And so destruction of property is used as intimidation and as means of control.
Okay. Michelle, can you bring up 1829? And this has already been admitted. Yes, thank you, Your Honor. And what, if any, evidence does this reflect as correlating behavior to risk factors of IPV?
I would say that, one, that demonstrates a good deal of violence and psychological abuse. I think it's pretty clear that they're trying to be intimidating. I don't think...
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Thank you. Please continue.
It would be people who would misuse ecstasy without cocaine, are prone to agitation, suspicion, jealousy, violence. What we're seeing there would be very consistent with that presentation.
Okay. Thank you. Michelle, can you now bring up 1830, I guess? And that's already been admitted into evidence as well, Your Honor. I'd ask that it be published. And what, if any, evidence does this correlate with behavior indicative of IPV perpetration?
Again, this is intimidation, psychological abuse, where you're solely trying to emotionally...
Objection, Your Honor. Can we be heard?
Okay, if you want to.
Dr. Spiegel, if you can answer the question, what, if any, evidence is this correlating to the risk factors for IPV perpetrator?
Again, I think the violence comes through.
Objection, Your Honor.
Just the evidence of risk factors, if you can.
The evidence of risk factor would be accepting a more than average degree of violence, as well as psychological abuse.
Okay. Are you aware of any record evidence of Ms. Heard writing on walls, mirrors, countertops, or painting canvases?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. You can take that down now. Now, you were also asked about Seroquel and some of the other prescription medications. Did you, during the course of your review of evidence, see the lists of medications that Mr. Depp was on at one point?
Yes, I read that list.
Michelle, I'm going to ask you to bring up Defendant's Exhibit 301. And Dr. Spiegel, it's not into evidence yet. I'm going to ask you to take a look at this. Is this one of the documents that you had that reflected the amount of medication that Mr. Depp was on as of October 26, 2014?
Yes.
Okay. And this was an email from Debbie Lloyd to Dr. Blaustein, his treating psychiatrist, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jury that we've got Seroquel, 50 mg? Can you
Objection, hearsay.
Can you just tell the? I haven't finished asking the question yet. So
let's approach.
Okay. Michelle, could you scroll up just so I can see all of them at the same time? Thank you. So, Dr. Siegel, if someone was taking 50 milligrams of Seroquel, 25 milligrams of Seroquel, and 50 milligrams of Seroquel and 50 all in one day, how would that impact them?
So, obviously, this is not for sleep because I'm presuming you're not wanting to sleep in the morning, noon, and from 4 to 6, although you're sleeping at night. What I would say is he's using it for one purpose, as I say, with substance use disorder. They're using it to calm down. They're using it just as a down and to relax. And given that you're taking 45 milligrams of Adderall a day to stay awake, and that's more than the prescribed for adults and children for that matter, the combination makes very little sense at all to me.
And if a person was taking 300 milligrams of Neurontin, I'm going to pronounce that wrong again, 4 times a day and 600 later in the day, how would that impact?
Again, you're looking at medications that are there solely for a substance use disorder patient to get them up and to calm them down. That's all this regimen is about. Gabapentin doesn't have a psychiatric indication other than, actually doesn't have a psychiatric indication, although it does calm you down. And it, as I may have intimated before, similar to Adderall, gabapentin is also abusable. Similar to quetiapine, Seroquel is also abusable. So you're getting these kind of unusually calming effects from these medicines while at the same time getting what's called a super therapeutic dose or an excessive amount of Adderall. And for the record book, adults are only indicated with Adderall for the extended release, not the immediate release preparation. And why that's relevant is the immediate release preparation is more abusable. You get more high quicker. The extended release goes out throughout the day. The immediate release gets you up right away and then down. Now, in ADHD, this medicine is very effective. But from what this is being used for, clearly based on the combination, no.
All right. Do addicts lie?
Yes.
All right. Now, you were asked about Mr. Depp passing out. Do you recall reading testimony of Mr. Depp passing out in the bathroom in his vomit?
Yes.
Okay. Does that help refresh your recollection of what you recall?
I mean, for the record book, I don't think that falling asleep with ice cream on you is a
Objection beyond the scope of the question.
Overruled.
Keep going.
I don't think taking Seroquel at night and falling asleep with ice cream on you is not what Seroquel is indicated for. It's not meant to put you out in a state where you don't even be able to stay awake to put ice cream away.
All right. Michelle, if you can pull up defendant's 1090. It's already into evidence. If we can publish that to the jury, Your Honor. Dr. Spiegel, does this look like, would this be evidence correlating with behaviors consistent with IPV perpetrator risk factors?
This would be correlated a person who is completely knocked out, and there's usually only one way someone gets knocked out that badly, and that's with pharmacological assistance, whether it be legal or illegal. They make it to the bed. They don't sleep with their head on a game box in a furniture. That doesn't happen to people who sleep, no matter how tired you are. No matter how tired. I've been a resident in the past, and I was up for 40, 45 hours.
Objection beyond the scope.
It's just explained, Your Honor.
Sustained.
All right. Michelle, can you pull up 1095, please? And I'm going to ask you the same question, Dr. Spiegel. What, if anything, does this indicate relating to risk factors for IPV perpetrators?
Again, colloquially passed out, and there's very few ways to get like that without pharmacological assistance, legal or illegal, or illegal.
And then let's pull up 1094, please, Michelle. Defense, and that's also been admitted. And now we have the ice cream picture. And what, if any, indication does this have?
Probably could see how I could.
Objection, speculation, no foundation.
What, if any, correlation, what, if any, evidence does this indicate correlative with the risk factors for IPV perpetrators?
Again, this proves one of the major risk factors and precipitating factors for intimate partner violence.
Objection, move to strike.
All right, sustained. I'll strike it from the record. Next question.
We'll just move on.
Okay.
You were asked about earpieces. Do you recall reviewing Tracy Jacobs and Joel Mandel's depositions?
Yes.
All right. And do you recall them both testifying that Mr. Depp had someone on salary to feed him his lines?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you've testified that you reviewed a substantial amount of evidence in this case. Did you find any evidence that Amber Heard exhibited conduct or behaviors indicative or consistent with any of the risk factors for perpetrators of IPV?
Objection beyond the scope.
Sustained.
Well, it was suggested with the borderline personality.
Sustained.
Okay. But you did find that for Mr. Depp, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you find record evidence that Mr. Depp had a substance abuse disorder?
Severe substance use disorder.
All right. Did any of the questions asked by Mr. Depp's counsel change any of your opinions in this case?
Nothing there. No, not my opinion has not been swayed an iota.
Okay. Do you hold them all still within a reasonable degree of medical and psychiatric probability or certainty?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Spiegel.
All right, thank you. Sir, you can have a seat in the courtroom or you're free to go. Thank you. All right, your next witness.
My next witness is Catherine Arnold.
Catherine Arnold.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case in the penalty of law? Thank you.
All right, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Will you please state your name for the record?
Catherine Arnold.
All right. And what is your profession?
I am an entertainment industry consultant and I also serve as an expert witness.
Okay. And can you please tell the jury your educational background?
Yes. So I've been in the entertainment industry for over 20 plus years. I started as an assistant at ICM, which is one of the largest talent agencies in Los Angeles that represents actors, writers, and directors. And I worked with the talent agent there. And then I also worked at William Morris, for William Morris, as a script reader. So I was working on scripts that they were delivered and submitted to for their actors, writers, and directors. After that, I went into development of film and television projects for a company based in New York called the Maltese Company, which actually produced animated television shows and feature films based on Wall Street, animated product, like toys. And then I went to work with a company called the Gruber Peters Company. And Gruber Peters was, at the time, one of the largest production companies in Los Angeles. They did films like Batman and Rain Man and Tango and Cash. They did TV shows like Witches of Eastwick. And there I was involved in the development of scripts. We worked with the studio directly in terms of what cast would be attached to the scripts and brought directors and talent to those projects. I then went on to work in, there's a lot. I went on to work in the independent film world as a film producer. So I found the material, I would get the financing, I would get the cast and the director attached to the project. We call that packaging. And then we would go and obtain financing for that either through equity sources or international sales and financing and bank financing. And then I also went on after that. I produced 5 or 6 films with actors that you may know, including Salma Hayek, Vincent D'Onofrio, Kirstie Alley, Thomas Jane, Ethan Hawke. And then I worked with a international sales and production company where I was the head of production, and I worked again on the development of scripts and the procurement of financing. So I worked in both the independent world and the studio world, meaning independently financed or financed by the big studios like Warner Brothers and Disney and Paramount and such as that. That's the bulk of my work in the entertainment industry.
Did any of your films win awards?
A couple of them did. So a couple of the independent films that I produced, one of them won, called The Coriolis Effect, won the Venice Film Festival in its category. And then I also produced another film that won the Heartland Film Festival Award. It's called the Crystal Award.
All right. And what other video production projects have you been involved in?
So throughout that time, in between those jobs, I also worked in the corporate world. So large studios like Warner Brothers and Disney and CBS would need corporate videos for their live events. So I would interview executives and interview their talent and then edit the piece together to create video and media for their live sales conferences that they had at that time. And then I also produced some commercials.
All right. And what, if any, experience did you have in corporate relations and licensing?
So early on in my career, I worked at the Los Angeles Olympic Organizing Committee, and I worked in the licensing department where we handled the licensing of the Olympic logo, and we also worked with sponsors and suppliers who were funding those Olympic Games. So it was a lot of contractual negotiations with the use of the logo, as well as raising money for the games and working with those corporate sponsors throughout the 2 years prior to the games and then during the games themselves.
And what, if any, experience do you have working on film festivals?
Well, I've had films in festivals. I've actually been very lucky to travel the world and gone to a lot of festivals with my films, both here in the United States and elsewhere. And at one point, I was also hired to raise sponsorship funds for the Sundance Film Festival. They had a new program that they were starting to do online festivals, and so I raised about $500,000 for them in about a month.
All right. And do you have a degree, a college degree?
Yes, I graduated from UCLA with a bachelor's degree in economics.
What does your current consulting practice entail?
So as an entertainment consultant, having been in the business in both the independent and the studio worlds as both a producer and an executive, I work with investment companies and production companies who are looking to navigate the various inroads of Hollywood. It's a business that's very different and unlike anything else and very relationship based. So I use my 20 years of experience to help them get cast, get financing, understand the distribution process, the marketing process, and get them set up to be able to produce their films.
Have you ever testified as an expert witness in the field of entertainment industry?
Yes.
Okay. Approximately how many times have you served as an expert?
I've been involved in somewhere between 85 and 100 cases as an expert, from beginning stages to testifying in court.
And have you ever testified as an expert on damages and defamation cases?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And approximately how many times have you qualified as an expert on that?
On defamation?
Yes.
I believe 3 or 4 times.
Okay. And have you ever been admitted to testify as an expert on damages?
Yes.
Okay. And how many times have you qualified as an expert on damages?
Almost all my cases have some form of damage economic damage related to the case. So I would say in all of the cases that I've testified in, I have been qualified in damages.
Okay. Have you ever served as an expert for both? Have you served as an expert for both plaintiffs and defendants?
Yes, I have.
Okay. How much of your current practice involves consulting as opposed to expert serving?
So over the last 10 or 12 years, it's been about 50-50. So I spend half my time working as a consultant and the other half working with lawyers on their cases.
Your Honor, I'm going to move to qualify Catherine Arnold as an expert in the entertainment industry, standards and practices, and related economic damages.
All right. Any objection? All right. So moved.
Thank you. Now, you have a dual role here as an expert, correct?
Yes.
Now, you're going to be testifying with respect to Mr. Depp's challenges to or claims of damages, and you're also going to be testifying to Amber Heard's damages, correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to start you with Mr. Depp's claims for damages.
Okay.
With respect to Mr. Depp's claimed damages, on what subject have you been asked to offer your opinion?
So I was asked to assess any alleged damages that the op-ed piece in the Washington Post that Ms. Heard wrote, whether that have impacted his career in any way, particularly did he lose any income or any economic opportunities because of the op-ed piece specifically.
All right. And have you been asked to limit that to the period of December 18, 2018, with the date of the op-ed, through November 2, 2020?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what materials did you review in making your analysis?
There were a lot of documents. I reviewed the pleadings of the case, the complaints, the discovery items, the responses to what they call interrogatories, which are the questions that the lawyers ask both sides. I reviewed Mr. Depp's deposition testimony, which there were volumes of that, as well as Ms. Heard's. I also reviewed the deposition testimony of the experts that were proffered that had to do with the entertainment industry, the agents and the management teams of both sides. Ron Schnell, the data expert. I also reviewed emails and texts between the parties, between their families, between their management teams, the audio recordings, the visual recordings that have been presented in this case and the previous cases that have been involved in the last couple of years. I also did my own independent research from general publicity and press and investigative articles, as well as those that are specific to the entertainment industry, and utilized some entertainment industry specific sources to get some information that was helpful to my case, to the case.
Thank you, Ms. Arnold. Please describe for the jury your observations with respect to Mr. Depp's career trajectory.
Well, Mr. Depp has had an extraordinary career over many years, so it's a long one to look at. Obviously, he was a rising star in the late 80s and in the 90s, starting with 21 Jump Street, and you've heard, all the films that I'm sure he's been in. He really started to break through when he worked with Tim Burton, the director, and of course his character Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean was, world renowned. and probably his biggest role. And he was, a well-liked, both critically and within the industry and within the public as a movie star. And at the same time, his behavior and both on and off the set, in his personal life and in his professional life, start to interfere with what we would say, what everybody saw was his great talent. And it started, there's some stories of issues that started back in the 80s and the 90s, but I would say really in the mid-2000s, between 2006 and 10, is when the behavior started affecting his work to a certain extent in terms of lateness on set. And then, as Ms. Jacobs, his talent agent, discussed with you in her deposition, it really started to affect her ability to get roles and the industry's willingness to work with him, given the issues that he was having with both behavior, tardiness, drinking, and the drug abuse, and other issues in his personal life. So it got more complicated for her to find him work, and I think it got harder for production companies and studios to hire him due to the challenges that would put on a production.
And when did Mr. Depp's career downturn begin, based on your review of all the record evidence?
Well, again, according to Ms. Jacobs, his agent, she mentioned that it started getting more challenging for her around 2010. The lateness on set was being made, she was being made aware of that more and more often from production executives and the producers that she was working with on the Pirates movie. And not only Pirates, it continued on the other films, including Mordecai and Murder on the Orient Express. And in around 2014, when he had the appearance, it was presumed that he was under the effects of alcohol at the Hollywood Film Awards in 2014.
Objection, Your Honor. Non-responsive.
She's answering the career downturn, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Please continue.
Thank you. In 2014, when Mr. Depp appeared in the Hollywood Film Awards, Ms. Jacobs received many phone calls from both producers, casting directors, and production executives asking her, what is going on with your client? Why, what's going on with his behavior? Can we get him under control? And then I think it really started to shift around the Pirates 5 movie in Australia with, again, the lateness and the issues with the singer that stopped production and things of that nature, and then it got harder and harder.
Now, based on your analysis, what has caused Mr. Depp's career downturn?
Objection. No foundation.
Overruled.
Can you please repeat the question?
Based on your analysis, what has caused Mr. Depp's career downturn? And I realize you've said a number of those, so just, is there anything else?
Sure. Well, we've talked about the erratic behavior, the tardiness, the drugs and alcohol abuse, and the lawsuits have had a really big impact, not just this lawsuit, but previous lawsuits that Mr. Depp has been involved with, because there's a lot of publicity around anything that he does. And every time he has filed a lawsuit, it has brought to light various issues with respect to whatever that lawsuit was about, whether it was about, erratic behavior or domestic abuse or drugs and alcohol and even spending habits. So every time a lawsuit has been filed, the press and the publicity has just been charged up and brought everything back to light. And it's been an unfortunate problem on that level for the industry to continue to work with him, even though all this is out in the public.
For the films that were shortly before Pirates 5, how successful were they? We're talking Mordecai, Alice Through the Looking Glass. I think you testified to some of those. The Lone Ranger, Tonto.
Right.
Objection. Compound.
Overruled.
Of course, Mr. Depp has had some obviously extremely successful films, but also in the 4 or 5 years prior and, through Pirates, there were films that didn't do well at all and were considered what the industry calls a bomb, which could have been Alice Through the Looking Glass, The Transcendence, the Lone Ranger, and Mordecai were films that just didn't perform, although they were valued in their financing based on Mr. Depp's star quality and acting ability. Unfortunately, they just didn't perform. So as many hits as he's also had a lot of recent, what they call failures in the business.
And what, if anything, did Mr. Depp do with respect to showing up for a press conference in Japan for Mordecai?
Ms. Jacobs mentioned in her deposition testimony that Mr. Depp didn't show up for the press conference in Mordecai, which he was not only an actor for, he was also a producer. And he didn't show up. Apparently, he was sleeping, so he wasn't able to make it.
Okay. Now, what, if any, impact did the Brooks litigation have on Mr. Depp's career?
Is the jury familiar with this already, or?
Well, I think you can. I mean,
okay. So the Brooks litigation was, there was a litigation around Mr. Depp had punched someone on one of the, I think it was a location manager on the set of a film called City of Lies. I don't know exactly what happened to that litigation. However, of course, again, it was written a lot about in the press, and it unfortunately came to the forefront that he had, violent behavior yet again.
So in 2018, and I'm going to say before the op-ed on December 18, 2018,
right.
Was there any negative articles, negative press about Mr. Depp?
For quite a while, when you're a celebrity such as Mr. Depp, you're in the limelight and everybody wants to look at everything that happens. So after every movie or after every incident, there was usually press. But the ones that were more significant were the ones in the Hollywood, a couple of them in the Hollywood Reporter and one in the Rolling Stone. So in 2017, there was an article in the Hollywood Reporter where the journalist discussed, I think the article was called Pirates of the Caribbean, The Diminishing Returns of Johnny Depp. And that Pirates, the last one was 5, right? And that one didn't perform nearly as well as the other previous Pirates of the Caribbean films. And there was some discussion that the character...
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
I think you could explain generally.
Sustained.
Okay. Let me ask you this. When was that Hollywood Reporter article on diminishing returns of Johnny Depp?
That was in the spring of 2017.
Okay. And you said, and I just want to make sure we understand, how well did Pirates 5 do compared to 1 through 4?
It performed less well by over $200 million.
Okay. What, if any, other negative press was there in this time frame? We'll take 2017, 2018, before the op-ed.
So in 2018, there was the Rolling Stones article that was an in-depth expose on Mr. Depp's life. Again, his erratic behavior, the money he was spending on wine.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
I think she can give generally, Your Honor, the negative.
Sustained.
All right. What, if any, knowledge do you have of whether Disney saw the Rolling Stone article?
There were emails between the publicity department and the co-chairs and some of the senior executive Disney that they would forward the articles as they came out, both the Hollywood Reporter article and the Rolling Stones article, and they would make commentary. And Alan Horn, who is the one of the co-chairs of Disney, used the word sad, and I think one of the other executives used depressing, that their film star was now being shown in this light to the public in a Rolling Stones article.
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
All right. Was there any more articles about Pirates of the Caribbean prior to the op-ed in December of 2018?
There was an article in October 28th, the Hollywood Reporter, October 28th, 2018, where the journalist had spoken to 2 writers of the film, and they were talking
Objection,
about rebooting
hearsay.
the franchise.
She's entitled to rely on hearsay, and she's just giving the general. She's not.
Approach.
So without saying what the article said, say what it's about.
Okay. So in October 28th, the article was about whether the Pirates of the Caribbean
Objection,
franchise
hearsay.
would be rebooted without.
Overruled.
Please continue.
In the article in October of 2018 was about whether or not the Pirates franchise was going to be what they call redefined without Johnny Depp, and that was regarding two writers that were on the project.
Okay.
And there was one other one I'd like to talk
go ahead,
about.
please.
So there was another article, there was an expose on the president of production. It was also in the Hollywood Reporter. And this is the one that Mr. Marks, Mr. Depp's expert, pointed to regarding the op-ed's impact on Mr. Depp's career. And the online article was, as Mr. Marks pointed out, published on December 20th of 2018. But the same article was in print on the morning of December 18th, 2018, which is the same morning of the op-ed. So that Hollywood Reporter article that Mr. Marks used to say...
Objection, no foundation.
Overruled.
Please continue.
Mr. Marks had used that article to show that Disney wanted to let go of Mr. Depp because of the op-ed, but it was actually printed in the Reporter the same morning that the Washington Post article was printed. So there's no way that the Washington Post article had any impact on what the Hollywood Reporter journalist wrote. So they were on the same morning. They were released simultaneously, interestingly enough.
And the one that was 2 days later was the same article, just online?
Same article, it was just online, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, what, if anything, was there about press in 2018 relating to The Sun and Dan Wooten and any litigation that Mr. Depp was bringing?
So a lot of press was about the UK trial in the lawsuit that Mr. Depp brought against the Sun in the UK about the wife beater title that they used. So there was a ton of press around that, both at the time that it was filed and throughout as documents were being shared with the public, and then, of course, during the trial itself.
Okay. And what is your understanding of when the article, the wife beater article, first appeared?
I believe it was in July of 2018, about 6 months before the op-ed piece.
And what is your understanding of when Mr. Depp filed suit against The Sun and Mr. Wooten?
Again, in 2018, I believe.
Okay. June, would it be? Would it refresh your recollection?
It was in the spring or summer. It was fairly shortly after the article, so it was long before the op-ed piece was out.
Okay. And what, if any, impact did Mr. Depp's litigation in the Sun case have on his career?
That was a really tough one on Mr. Depp's career, because every allegation of abuse and every text, every email, all the audio, all the visual stuff was brought to light and made public. And so not only did the public get to see it, but the industry was watching closely. And it's hard for studios, especially a studio like Disney, who's family-oriented, be connected to a star that has texts about burnt corpses and violent behavior in video. So it was a big conflict for a lot of the people in the industry to how to navigate that if they're going to work with a star.
And what, if any, impact did Mr. Depp's other litigation against Mandel and Bloom have during that time period?
As I was trying to say earlier, every time Mr. Depp brings a lawsuit, because he's such a well-known public figure, the spotlight goes on him. So every time a lawsuit was filed, whether it was to against his business manager, against his former lawyer, even when he fired his talent agent, it becomes news. And then everybody talks about what could have preceded that. Why would that lawsuit have happened? And then they look at the details. So again, the erratic behavior and the financial issues and the drinking and drug abuse was all part and parcel of every one of those. And it was brought to light yet again each time.
What is your understanding of Mr. Depp's claims regarding Pirates of the Caribbean 6 and how that impacted?
Well, Mr. Depp is claiming that he's lost money on Pirate 6, but Pirate 6 hasn't even been made yet, nor is there even a script that has been what we call greenlit, moved towards production. So I don't know how you lose something that hasn't happened. So I think that's what you're looking for me to.
And in fact, since Mr. Depp's damages are limited November 2, 2020 and nothing since, and that hasn't happened, is there any way he could claim damages for Pirate 6?
Well,
Objection leading.
Overrule.
Again, you can't claim damages for something that hasn't even happened, whether he was in it or not in it, or was going to be in it, or might have been in it, whether it was 2018 or now. There just is no Pirate 6. Not only did he not have a contract even back in the day, 2018 or after that, no contract had been signed for a Pirate 6. It doesn't exist as we...
Objection
as we
legal
today.
conclusion.
I
Sustain the last part.
How do you know he doesn't have a legal contract?
Well, Ms. Jacobs said he didn't have a legal contract, and also his agents at CAA said he had not yet negotiated a contract for Pirate 6. And again, there is no script, so they haven't greenlit it, as we say. They don't have it cast or with the director yet.
Okay. Based on your analysis, what, if any, impact did Ms. Heard's op-ed have on whether Mr. Depp could claim a loss for Pirate 6?
Zero.
Okay. And why do you say that?
Again, well, many things. The movie doesn't exist yet, so that's one. But even as important is that Disney, in their file for this trial, did not have the op-ed piece as part of all of the information they had read and looked about and discussed. The conversations of Mr. Depp not being in whatever new version of Pirates, the franchise that goes forward, those were in discussions long before the op-ed piece even came out. And there are other factors that Disney was considering: the lateness on set, the cost overruns that costs, which can go from hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars when you have crews sitting around for 2 to 4 hours, 8 hours, or even several weeks to a month when the finger incident happened. So on top of that, Mr. Depp is an expensive actor. He can earn between $20 and $25 million per movie plus back end. So it's very expensive. So when you put that all together, the rising cost of Mr. Depp's talent, the challenges that they had to keep it on budget because of his lateness and his tardiness, and all the other allegations that would affect a brand such as Disney, right? Someone talks about a burnt corpse, does not necessarily coincide with the brand of Disney. So there were many problems. And interestingly enough, there was a lot of conversation internally in the industry.
Objection hearsay.
She's entitled to rely on hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustain. You can't say that's hearsay.
All right. Please continue without saying what the discussion in the industry was.
The Jack Sparrow character had been exhausted in terms of where it could go creatively, and I think the studio is looking for a way for it to renew the franchise, but not necessarily base it entirely on the Jack Sparrow character, which is where it had ended up the last couple of years.
Okay,
and evidenced by the lesser box office of Pirates 5 compared to the earlier ones.
Right. And was there any article that came out on November 5, 2020, 3 days after the damages are cut off, relating to Pirates of the Caribbean and Mr. Depp's chances of being Jack Sparrow?
I think they reiterated the fact that he was probably not going to be in the movie.
Okay. Now, what impact has the op-ed had on Mr. Depp's career?
Very little. Hardly anybody even knew the op-ed existed before he filed suit.
Okay.
If anybody that I know, but certainly not Disney.
Okay. And what impact has the op-ed had on Mr. Depp's Q scores?
According to what I read of Mr. Alan Jacobs, an expert in statistical analysis, and from my own research on websites that are available to us, Mr. Depp's Q score, or if you're familiar with IMDb, which is Internet Movie Database, which is available to public and to the professional side, his Q score did not change dramatically. It was kind of in the middle of exactly the high and low of his Q scores overall. It was in the middle. It was at like 113, which is where it was a couple weeks before and a couple weeks after. So the op-ed didn't have any effect on his Q score, and that was reiterated by Mr. Jacobs in his deposition testimony.
And then you testified in response to an earlier question I had that people or that nobody seemed to notice the op-ed until Mr. Depp filed suit. Now that was on March 1, 2019. Do you recall?
Yes, that's when
Okay.
the lawsuit was filed.
And why do you say that they didn't notice until then?
Because the op-ed piece for most people in the industry kind of came and went without much fanfare or much conversation. It was much more about I don't think very many people even know it was written until the allegations were made by Mr. Depp in the lawsuit. It kind of came in and out of the radar very quickly, if anybody even saw it at all.
All right. Between December 18, 2018 and November 2, 2020, our window here, has Mr. Depp continued to star in films?
So Mr. Depp, the article the op-ed piece came out December 18 and 20 of 2018. In January and February of 2019, he shot a film called Minamata, which was an independent film that it was what we call a passion project. He loved the script and wanted to do it. So he was able to film that after the op-ed piece. And then the Dior campaign, Sauvage, I don't know the exact dates of filming, but I know that it did air throughout 2019. And it's my understanding that he still may have that contract with Dior, so he continued that product endorsement. And then in in the spring and the fall, I believe it was, Mr. Depp was able to do press for the film Waiting for the Barbarians. He went to the Deauville Film Festival. He went to the Venice Film Festival. He was well received at the press conferences. You know, life was at the same level for him in terms of his popularity over in Europe. They were still, he was still working on press for the films. And then, of course, he was scheduled to film Fantastic Beasts in early November of 2020.
And that's no longer the case, is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
Can we approach?
Okay.
And that's no longer the case, correct, on Fantastic Beasts? I don't want you to say anything more than that. That's no longer...
It's no longer the case, correct.
He's no longer in that film, correct?
He was paid for it, but he does not star in the film.
Okay, thank you. Now, what, if any, effect did the op-ed have on Mr. Depp's fan following?
I don't think it had any effect on his fan following. Again, his Q scores didn't shift, and he clearly has a strong fan base.
In your opinion, what or who has caused the damage, if there is any, to Mr. Depp on his career and reputation between December 18, 2018 and November 2, 2020?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
Mr. Depp.
And why do you say that?
Well, again, filing the lawsuits, bringing to light the issues, is Mr. Depp doing that on his own accord? And any statements that were made by his team, Mr. Waldman or anyone else, is associated with Mr. Depp, and those statements that came out, the defamatory statements, which we'll talk about in a minute, were also put out by Mr. Depp's team. So in actuality, he's causing his own demise by bringing these lawsuits forward and continuing to kind of ignite the fire of negative publicity around both of them.
Okay. Are all of your opinions to within a reasonable degree of probability or certainty with respect to Mr. Depp's damages?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to move you to Amber Heard's damages. With respect to Amber Heard's claims for damages, on what subject have you been asked to offer your opinion?
So I was asked to look at the reputational harm and economic loss that Ms. Heard incurred due to the defamatory statements that Mr. Waldman, on behalf of Mr. Depp, made in April of 2020 and again in June of 2020.
All right. And what materials did you review in forming your opinions?
again, many of the same materials that I reviewed for Mr. Depp's case, which was the deposition testimony, the pleadings, the discovery, all of that was included, as well as expert testimony that was based on statistical analysis of negative social media campaigns that were created, as well as what happened. I talked to Ms. Heard's agents. I read their depositions. I talked to her publicist. I read her deposition. I talked to Ms. Heard herself to get a first-person accounting of what happened from her perspective after those defamatory statements were made. And then I looked at the, again, emails back and forth and texts back and forth with the studio, Warner Brothers, and other producers that the management team was working with to get Ms. Heard more work.
Okay. Now, before I go into the questions that I'm going to ask, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of define this so that we're all on the same page going through it. The jury has seen the 3 defamatory statements. They're defendants 1245, 1246A, and 1247. And I'm just going to refer to them as the Depp/Waldman statements in asking you all these questions. Will you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, good. Please describe Amber Heard's career prior to the publication of the Depp-Waldman statements.
So Amber's had a long career for someone who is not, is fairly young still. She was in over 50 productions, I believe including Aquaman and Justice League, but let's just say close to 50 productions. Well, certainly 50 productions before the defamatory statements were made. She had, a consistent working actor's career. Her agents were strategic as she started getting more work, that they wanted her to work with better and better directors, to have, the Danish Girl is a film that had a strong director and a strong critical acclaim. And then she went from that to getting Justice League, which is on the bigger budget, is a bigger scale movie, and then of course Aquaman and Aquaman 2. So her career was following a very nice steady rise, and she was on the precipice of a meteoric rise with with Aquaman and Aquaman 2 prior to the statements.
Was Aquaman a successful film in terms of box office sales?
Aquaman was an extremely successful film. It made over $1 billion, and I believe it is the highest grossing DC comic film ever.
Okay. Now, what, if any, accolades did Amber receive for her role in Aquaman? And I'm going to call it, sometimes I'll call it Aquaman 1 just to make sure we don't get confused. But.
Right. So in Aquaman 1, there were many emails from the director and the producer and
Objection, hearsay.
She's just characterizing, Your Honor. She's not quoting them.
Well, I don't know where it's going. I'll overrule at the moment.
Thank you.
She got emails from the director and the producer stating that they loved her performance.
Objection,
and they loved her work.
hearsay.
You can't say what the emails say, but you can summarize them or characterize them. Can you do that?
Accolading emails? Emails of accolade from her, from the director and the producer.
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled as to that.
Thank you. Okay. What type of press opportunities did Amber have prior to the Depp-Waldman statements?
So the press really loved working with Amber. She was on the cover of many magazines after The Danish Girl, after Justice League, after Aquaman. She was the cover girl, I think it was, of Marie Claire or Elle in the UK. She had a cover story of a big magazine in Mexico and Australia. They were, one magazine called her Woman of the Year, another one called her Role Model of the Year. So she got a lot of press. She did a lot of press, both in magazines, but also on the press tours and the press junkets that she did for the films.
And were some of those California Style, Marie Claire, Elle, Shape, Glamour?
Yes, there was a lot of
Objection,
them.
leading.
Overruled.
There was a lot of them, so I'm not, don't remember all of them, but it was, GQ, Elle, Marie Claire, the big magazines, both here, the UK, Eastern Europe, in Latin America, and in Australia.
And what about after the release of Aquaman, which was December 2018? How was her press then?
Well, the press tour was doing well, and they wanted to give her a lot more press. And I think up until the defamatory statements came out, she was on deck to do a lot of press. And then it
Objection, no foundation.
Overruled.
Please continue.
So the press and the request for press went silent after the defamatory statements were made, and which then the negative social media campaign ensued after that.
Now, what factors relating to social media does the entertainment industry rely on when considering an actor for a role?
Social media becomes a big part of how studios decide to use an actor or an actress in a film, because they want to know how the general public feels about them. They want to know what the consumer feels about that actor. So when there's positive social media, that's a good thing for the actor. When there's negative social media, it can be very bad, because not only can social media be directed at the actor or the actress themselves, but it can also be directed towards the movie, towards the movie company, towards the product that the actor or actress is working with. So it becomes very complicated, and it can get very messy to continue working with an actor or an actress if there's a lot of negative social media around them.
Okay. And after the Depp-Waldman statements, what happened on social media?
After the Depp-Waldman statements, social media blew up with negative tweets and Instagram posts and, Facebook posts and Snapchat and trolling, as we call it. It was just negative. According to Mr. Schnell, there was over 1.2 million negative tweets about Amber using hashtags that used the words in the statement of the Depp-Waldman statements, that 1.2 million negative statements between April of 2020 and November or January of 21. That's a lot of negative publicity, and there was just a lot of what we call noise around Ms. Heard and her work of any kind.
Can you please describe to the jury what a negative social campaign is?
So, a negative social campaign would be when a fan base, or in this case, according to both the forensic statistical analyst as well as Ms. Heard's agents and the product that she was working with, L'Oreal, and her publicist, it was a campaign that included both live accounts, live Twitter, people that actually have are individuals, as well as what we call
Objection.
bots.
May I be heard?
All right, here I come.
All right. Other than the bots, please describe the rest of the social media, the negative social media campaign. What's
The fan base was very energized by Mr. Is it the Depp-Wald state?
Yeah, let me just
The
ask.
Depp-Waldman? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I
There's a lot in my brain right now.
It doesn't matter. Why don't I do this? Let me formulate a different question. How has the negative social media campaign been used against Amber Heard since the Depp-Waldman statements?
Great. So the negative campaign has been used both to, let's fire Amber off of Aquaman, to the product that she had an endorsement contract with was L'Oreal, the makeup. And every time that L'Oreal mentioned Amber Heard and the product together, they would get harassed. Her publicist company was harassed. Any kind of movie that she was related to or television project that she was related to got negative attention from the social media world. Even the charities that she was involved with were getting hammered, if you will, or bombarded by negative social media, which made it difficult to work with Amber on any level because negativity was brought to their product, service, or film.
Okay. And is that negative social media campaign ongoing to this day?
Yes.
Okay. And you were talking a little bit before, I think, about remove Amber Heard from Aquaman 2. What were your observations with respect to that in connection to the Depp-Waldman statements?
Again, the statements, the social media campaign, whether called, remove Amber from Aquaman or, negativity for her relationship in that film, it always tended to use words that were inside the defamatory statements. They became hashtags, right? So, if it was said in the defamatory statement, they were often reiterated in the tweets and the posts.
Okay. How difficult is it for an actor to repair this type of negative social media?
Well, first of all, it has to stop. Okay, so once it stops, then an actor and their team can work slowly and patiently in both, maybe it's press interviews, maybe it's relationship with charity, maybe it's a small role in a movie and they do well and they kind of rebuild their career. But it can take 2, 3, 4, 5 years or more to rehabilitate your career. But first and foremost, it needs to stop. It just needs to stop so that they can, the consumer can get beyond it, and then they can reactivate their career by doing their work again.
Describe Amber Heard's reputation after the Depp-Waldman statements.
Well, the reputation, I guess, depends on who you're talking to, but in the public, it's been very negative. In the industry, they like her work, but they can't work with her right now, again, because every time her name is mentioned, the negativity flares up again. So it doesn't make sense for them to try to make a movie which costs millions of dollars and then have a lot of negativity towards the film or the TV show or the product. So her world has been silent in terms of opportunities, and even things that she wanted to work on are no longer available to her.
Has Amber been able to obtain roles after the Depp-Waldman statements?
For a long time, no. Very recently, she was able to do a small independent film from some people out of who get their financing out of Europe. But up until that, no, she has not worked.
Now, based on the fact that Amber came out of Aquaman, what should her opportunity, what would you have expected following the release of Aquaman, December 2018, up to what's going on now?
I like to call Aquaman really, Amber Heard's Star is Born moment. It was that moment where not only was she a good actor, but she was now world renowned because she was in the most successful film almost of all time, if not all time, and certainly for DC Comics. She was on the poster with the very handsome Jason Momoa, and they were this couple, and she was strong and beautiful, and it was just this extraordinary moment for her career to take off, right? Her agents were excited, the producers were excited, everybody just wanted to hit the ground running, and let's do more work.
What, if anything, happened to Amber's participation in Aquaman 2?
So for a moment in time, in February 2021, there were conversations that Amber's, I'm going to be technical with you, her option for employment was not going to be exercised. So they may not have hired her again, even though she had a contract for it. There was some question as to whether she was going to be hired again on Aquaman 2.
All right. And did ultimately then she still get hired for Aquaman 2?
She did. Her management team fought very hard, and they ultimately ended up hiring her, but also not only because of what her management team did, but Jason Momoa, the star, and James Wan, the director, committed to her in an email saying, if we are involved in this movie, you will
Objection,
hire.
no foundation, hearsay.
I'll sustain the
Don't
objection.
say what the email said, just summarize it or describe it, please.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to understand this world. So her management team worked hard, and Jason Momoa and the director were adamant that she was in the film.
Objection, hearsay.
Worked hard
I think
to be in the film.
Your Honor, she has to be able to say that.
Well, sustain as to hearsay. Next question.
So, what, if any, assurances did Mr. Momoa and Mr. Wan give Amber that she would be in Aquaman 2?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
What, if any, are you aware of any chemistry issues between Amber and Jason Momoa from Aquaman?
According to the fact that they did a chemistry test with Ms. Heard and Jason Momoa in order for her to be hired, that is a good indication that they thought the two of them had good chemistry. Obviously, when you look at the movie, they have good chemistry, and the poster, they have good chemistry. So I think it's general awareness that they had great chemistry.
And what, if anything, would also suggest, with respect to Aquaman 2, that Jason Momoa believed they had good chemistry?
He wanted her in the movie.
Okay.
Hearsay.
I think she has to be able to rely on.
Sustained. I'll strike it from the record.
In your review of all of the record evidence, what, if anything, did you see in writing anywhere that there was ever any chemistry or creative issue with Amber Heard and Jason Momoa from Aquaman 1?
There were no communications whatsoever that there was no chemistry between the two.
And what, if anything, did you, in all the record evidence, did you see that the producer or Jason Momoa did not want Amber Heard in Aquaman 2?
I did not see any evidence of that.
Okay. In fact, the opposite, correct?
Correct, again.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, what, if any, leverage did Amber Heard have to renegotiate her salary under the circumstances of the discussions you were talking about with not exercising her option?
She had zero leverage. She was fighting for her life to stay in the film.
Okay. Now, is it typical for an actor to be able to negotiate an increase in their salary after a successful franchise?
So you may know this already, and so I apologize if you've heard it before. I don't know what's been brought to your attention, but in a franchise such as a potential franchise as Justice League and Aquaman, the customs and practice is that the studio will make an agreement with the actor that incorporates potential future films. So if Justice League does well, they want to know what they're going to pay the actor for the next one and the next one and the next one. And in those successive terms in the contract, the fee for that actor customarily goes up. It can go up by 10%, 20%, 100%. It could double, what have you. And in the case, as Ms. Kovacevic stated in her testimony, that in a successful franchise, that a movie that's made $1 billion, the actors' agents will go back and try to renegotiate that upcoming price tag. So if it was going to be X, they might want it to be 2X or 3X. And that's very standard in the industry, to renegotiate your contracts when there's many films in one single contract that each have their own price points.
What, if any, other actors in Aquaman 1 were able to renegotiate their contracts?
Jason Momoa renegotiated his contract very significantly from Aquaman 1 to Aquaman 2.
Do you know roughly how much more?
It went up from the, somewhere between $3 and $4 million to $15 million.
Okay. Did Amber have a contract for Aquaman 1?
Yes.
How much was she paid for Aquaman 1?
Aquaman 1, she was paid $2 million.
Okay. And did that same contract provide for if she was in Aquaman 2?
I'm sorry, I apologize. Aquaman 1, I believe she got $1 million. Aquaman 2, she was supposed to get $2 million. I apologize. The numbers, there were a lot of numbers in that one contract. So Aquaman 1, it was $1 million. Aquaman 2, it was going to be $2 million.
All right. Now, based on your experience and knowledge in the industry, how much would Amber Heard have been able to negotiate her contract but for the Depp-Waldman statements? For Aquaman 2, I'm asking.
Right. Well, as you can see from Mr. Momoa's contract, that went up exponentially, up to $15 million. Ms. Heard, I don't know if she would have gotten $15 million for the movie, but she certainly could have increased it by $1 or $2 million or even doubled it. So if it was 2, it could have been 4 or even 5 or 6, depending on the enthusiasm if it had just rolled from Aquaman 1 to Aquaman 2 without any of this negativity that was created by the Depp-Waldman statements.
What, if anything, happened to Amber's role in Aquaman 2 after the Depp-Waldman statements?
It was diminished.
Okay. Now, why would Amber have been featured more prominently in Aquaman 2?
Objection, no foundation.
It's only a foundation.
Okay. What usually determines, or are you able to speak to whether Amber should have been or would have been more prominently featured in Aquaman 2?
Well, a couple of things.
Wait, I'm trying to get your foundation. Are you able to speak to that?
Yes.
Okay. And please tell the basis of that and then your opinion.
So there's two things. When two actors do well in a romantic relationship and, they get married or they're going to have a baby, you want to follow that through, because part of what did well in Aquaman was not only the action sequences, but to have a strong female character having a relationship with a strong male character, it's very empowering, right? So that was working for them in the first place. The poster of Aquaman that went around the world was, one of the main posters was of the two of them together standing proud and strong, right? Being that couple. And so naturally, as you go and develop scripts in the industry, you want to follow on the things that are working. And according to Ms. Heard, when she read the first script for Aquaman 2, she had a strong romantic arc for the entire film, and then she also got to do some great action sequences at the end of that storyline in that script. So she was featured predominantly throughout the script of Aquaman 2 when she first read it.
All right, and then what happened?
Well, she didn't hear anything, so she wasn't getting the scripts when her colleagues were getting the scripts. She heard that through her agents. And then when she got the script, it was pared down from the first script dramatically. They had her in the hospital very shortly in the first part of the movie called Act 1. They had her in the hospital, and they pretty much had her in the hospital, and then she was going to do this action sequence in the end. She trained 5 hours a day for several months with a trainer to do this big action sequence. And then when she got to set, two things happened. One, the costume designer said, "I don't know what happened to your role. It got diminished." And
Objection,
two,
hearsay.
Sustained.
All right, go ahead with the second one. That's
and
all right.
more importantly, though, this big action sequence that she was going to do at the end of the movie, in the third act, was cut out, and they took it away from her. So it was radically reduced from what it was in the script and what she even trained for while she was preparing for the movie.
And what, if any, changes were made to the storyline?
I haven't seen the movie yet
Okay.
specifically, so I can't really speak to that yet.
All right, and when you say she was in the hospital, what do you mean by, was she injured in the first scene?
I believe that in the first act of the movie, she was injured somehow or had something to do with the baby. I don't know exactly. I'm just going with what Ms. Heard told me about, was that she ends up in the hospital early in this new Aquaman 2 movie and doesn't really come out till the end to kind of wrap things up. But all of the interactions with Momoa's character and certainly the action scenes were taken out.
Okay. How has Amber typically been involved in promotions for her films?
As we talked about earlier, actively involved in the press and the promotion, whether that was on the press junkets, what we call when they tour the world and the actors tour together and answer questions from the press at various screenings and film festivals. And then also she was, on the cover of magazines, usually after her movies, especially after Justice League.
And how was the promotion of Aquaman 2 affected by the Depp-Waldman statements?
Amber has not been involved in any of the promotion that's been done to date, or very little, particularly in a teasers that I've seen, we call, short little films about the making of and so forth. She's not featured in them. And also, very specifically, there was a big event that Warner Brothers put on during the fandom. I think it's a DC fandom event, which is a big kind of like Comic-Con style event. And they invited all of the actors, or the majority of the actors that have strong roles in film, to participate both in the posters and the artwork, and also participate at DC fandom. And Ms. Heard was not invited to either be in the poster or be at the event. And in fact, they told her she cannot come.
Now, can this hurt Amber's career, not being allowed to be in any of the promotional materials?
Absolutely. It means that nobody knows about her. She doesn't have the same part in the film. It's not going to take her on to her next movie. She's not being associated with the tremendous amount of promotion that's going to be made for this, movie that everybody's looking forward to see. So she's not a part of it because of this negative campaign.
How have the Depp-Waldman statements affected any other films or TV project promotions for Amber?
So prior to the defamatory statements, but either around the, after or around the time that Aquaman 1 came out, she was in the TV show called The Stand. It was based on a Stephen King novel. So, big book, going to be a big TV show. And again, Ms. Heard didn't do any press or promotion for that for the same reasons.
And what, if any, plans were there to have Amber Heard on the cover of LA Style relating to Stand before the Depp Waldman statements?
Right. So Ms. Heard was in, and they had done an article about her participation in this TV show, The Stand, the Stephen King novel related TV show, and they were going to give her the cover picture and cover story, and they took that away. I don't know if the article existed, but they certainly took away the cover picture and the cover story.
Okay. How have the Depp Waldman statements affected press requests for Amber?
There aren't any.
So
yes, they affected it because there used to be a lot of press requests, and now there aren't any.
Has Amber Heard obtained any roles since the Depp Waldman statement?
Again, for many years, no, for a good period of time, or a year and a half, 2 years, until she got this small movie called Into the Fire.
Okay. Has Amber obtained any studio movie roles since the Depp Waldman statements?
No.
How, if at all, have Amber's philanthropic opportunities been affected by Depp Waldman statements?
Again, she had some passion projects. She was invited to do some charity work, and she also had her own passion projects that she, loved and wanted to be involved with and even travel for. But they decided it wasn't going to be a good idea because every time she appears anywhere, the social media negativity campaign starts up again. So she hasn't been able to do any of her charity work.
What is an endorsement?
So an endorsement is when an actor associates themselves with a product, either for print promotion or commercials, like Jennifer Aniston doing the water, or Matthew McConaughey doing the car commercial. That's a product endorsement. He's paid to say that the product is good and be associated with the product.
How important are those endorsements to the actors in the entertainment industry?
Well, very, very important on two levels. One, they bring a good amount of income to them when they're not shooting a movie, so it's a good way to make money in between film roles. And then also, it shows the studios and the production executives and the financiers that the actor is relevant in the community because they're being associated with a product. So if it's a well-known product, that's really great. If it's a medium product, that's great, and so forth and so on. So you want to be, if you can, and if that's something that you like to do, not everybody does, but if they like to do that, then they can get a lot of value out of those product endorsements because then the studios see that there's a connection with the consumer, not just on the film, but also with product.
Did Amber have any endorsement activities prior to the publication of the Depp Waldman statements?
Yes.
Please explain.
So Amber was hired by L'Oreal to be a product and endorse their product, the makeup line. And she had a $1.5 million contract for 2 years. And they were able to work. They had 20 days of her work. They had the right to work with her for 20 days. And she started the work. And then when the defamatory statements came out, they essentially put a pause on working with her. So they no longer brought her to photo shoots. They no longer had her do public events for the product. And basically said, we love you, but we can't work with you right now because it's just too much.
Objection, hearsay.
All right. I'll sustain the objection. Next
Okay.
question.
Have the Depp Waldman statements affected that deal in any way with L'Oreal?
Well, they put it on pause and haven't done any of the work, so she's not out there in the public eye related to the product. And they have decided to continue working with her at some point once, as I said, this all quiets down, this trial is over, and hopefully the negative campaigns will stop. So they extended her contract, but they did not pay her for that extension.
And has Amber been hired for any other endorsement deals since the Depp Waldman statements?
No.
Now, did you assess Amber's losses as a result of the Depp Waldman statements?
Yes.
What did you do to assess those?
Well, first of all, I looked at Amber's career directly, so I wanted to see, as I said earlier, she worked consistently, and then she was on this kind of very large upswing with the big movies, Justice League and Aquaman and all of that, and The Stand with the Stephen King project, and then it stopped. right? So her work stopped. And then I looked at other actors that kind of grew up at the same time frame. Grew up meaning they started their career and had the same time frame to start going from the smaller projects to the well-known director projects to the big movie projects. And I looked at those actors, and I then saw, after they had their Stars Born moment, if you will, I wanted to see where their careers went. So I looked at several actors to see, including Jason Momoa, her co-star, to see what happened in their careers after such a successful film as Aquaman came out.
And why did you use that method of analysis?
It's a very common methodology in the entertainment industry to work with what we call comps. I think Ms. Kovacevic even used that word, comp. So you know, with films, you try to find comparable films. With actors, you look to see comparable actors. So you can kind of, it's not a distinct actual, this is going to happen, but this is the probability with a reasonable certainty that with the right management team that she had and her acting ability and her looks and the press that she was getting and should have continued to get, that her career would have been similar to these other actors.
Have you used that method in other cases in which you've been an expert on damages?
Yes, I have.
Who did you select as comparable actors for your comparison?
Well, I wanted to look at actors that were in superhero films that had done really well at the box office. So I looked at Jason Momoa, her co-star. I looked at Gal Gadot, who was is in Wonder Woman. I looked at Ana de Armas, who was in
Blade Runner?
Thank you, Blade Runner. I looked at Zendaya, who was in Spider-Man, and I looked at Chris Pine, who was in Star Trek and also Wonder Woman. About the, similar age range, all attractive actors, all with good acting skills, all able to do stunts. So there are not that many actors to look at who do superhero characters. So it was a small pool to work from, but I took a wide range from those actors, both men and women, to see what could potentially happen to Miss Heard's career.
Do you consider all of them to be identical for purposes of measurement?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, no two actors are identical. You can only look at that within a range of characteristics and work history, management team, and so forth.
And we've heard from Mr. Banya. Did you review Mr. Banya's Q-score analysis regarding the comparables you used?
Yes, I did.
And what, if any, opinions have you formed in reviewing Mr. Banya's analysis regarding the comparables you selected?
So Mr. Banya looked at calendar years to assess, so what happened in December of, 2017 or 18 or 19, what happened in June, what happened in a very specific time frame, which works on some statistical analysis. But when you're talking about actors and their relationships to Q scores are related to the actor's viability in the consumer's mind, if you will, how well known or how much they're coming up in conversation. And so Mr. Banya did not look at time periods of the actors that I compared them with to the film when it came out, so like right after the success of their big film, what was their Q score, but moreover, he just looked at them in a year range. So it doesn't coincide from actor to actor just because you look at it over time. You have to look at it specifically after each of those individuals' box office success with a particular film. You look at the Q score, high or low during that, and then you look at how low it drops, say, a couple months afterwards, and then if it comes back up, if they have another film or another event that brings them into the limelight again. So it's not about time, it's related to a specific activity or event, and he did not do that.
Okay. What did your comparison show in terms of films that those actors had been in since their breakout roles? I'm talking about the comparables.
In terms of their, I'm not quite sure I understand.
Well, what happened with these other actors after they had their
unrelated to Q scores.
Right.
Oh, okay, sorry. So all those actors' careers, the ones I mentioned, they all either were a steady rise or even a meteoric rise in terms of where their career went after their Star is Born moment. Then they got some other good films, and maybe they got another film that performed extremely well. So it was a range, but they all were on an upward trajectory without a doubt.
And what does this mean for Amber?
With a reason, I mean, the way that the kind of industry works is usually, unless there is a force majeure or some really negative event, her career should have followed that same upward swing in about the same time frame, give or take 6 months to a year. But it would be very reasonable to believe that her career would have been on an upward trajectory within the range of those other actors.
What, if any, comparisons did you make respecting endorsement deals of these actors with Amber?
Again, all those actors that we've talked about all did multiple endorsement deals after their big movies or after their big series of movies. Jason Momoa is on, Rocket Mortgage and Harley Davidson, as well as, 5 or 6 other companies. Zendaya is Lancome and fashion and water and jewelry, and Gal Gadot and Chris Pine and Ana de Armas. They've all done either a couple or many, and all of them have associated with a large brand. Unlike Amber, who hasn't even been able to work on the one contract that she had. She certainly didn't get any others.
So what did your analysis show with respect to Amber Heard's losses, but for the Depp-Waldman statements?
They were significant, if we follow the trajectory of her, colleagues.
Well, let's start with at Aquaman 2. What would she have realized there?
Well, as I stated earlier, so from Aquaman 1 to 2, it went from $1 million to $2 million, right? So that was a pre-written contract. It doubled. So the agents were very excited after the success of Aquaman to go and negotiate a much higher fee like they did for Jason Momoa. They weren't able to do that. So in that instance alone, it was more than likely a $2 million loss just from that movie alone.
So 2 to 4, you had said before?
It could have been 4, it could have been 6.
Objection leading.
Sustain.
Okay. What about other films?
So once, as Amber's agent, Ms. Kovacevic, I was doing okay. Ms. Kovacevic said that once you get that quote of the $2 million from Aquaman 2, that kind of was like the baseline for any other movie she would have done. So any other studio movie would have started from there, and depending on the success of Aquaman and how much press she did, maybe she worked on another great director, independent film, whatever, that $2 million for a studio film, and had it jumped to $4 million with the renegotiation, that then would have been the basis. So any future studio film that she would have done, any big budget film, would have been the basis at $4 million, and then most likely have gone up from there if she was able to get others, which she should have, just like the other actors.
Let's talk about TV for a minute. What would those losses have included?
Well, On the Stand, which was, about the same time as Aquaman, but got the press and the promotion got cut off because of the defamatory statements and the negative campaign, she got paid $200,000 an episode on The Stand. So on a TV series of 9 episodes, it's $1.8 million. So if she had, again, done other TV shows, it's very likely that whether she worked with a streamer or with one of the networks, that fee would have gone up from there. Her agents would have been able to use the leverage of the success of Aquaman 2 to put her, if she had done another television show, given rise to even a higher episodic fee. Some actors go up to $1 million an episode. Jason Momoa's in his TV show got $1 million. So there's an exponential range of where she could have gone.
All right. What about endorsements?
Same thing. All the other actors were doing over the course of a couple years period, anywhere from 5, 6, 7 other endorsement deals, and Ms. Heard realistically should have gotten endorsement deals in other categories. L'Oreal is makeup, so probably not in makeup, but maybe water or clothing or jewelry or wellness, or it could have been anything else. And so she too should have, with a reasonable degree of certainty, gotten other contract deals based on the success of the films that she's been associated with and the TV shows she's been associated with.
And what would that have translated into in terms of dollars?
So in terms of dollars, okay, so if it was $1.5 million for L'Oreal for a 2-year contract, and let's give her 4 other $1.5 or $2 million deals, which all those other actors, especially the ladies, have gotten, then you're looking at an additional $8 million of income over time. I'm not saying this is in one period. We're looking at as far back as the defamatory statements of 2020 to now, which is almost 2 years. And again, as I said earlier, even when this is quiet, it will take 3 to 5 years for her to rehabilitate her career if she can. So we have to look at it as a period of a minimum of 5 years. So when I say $8 million for endorsement contracts, it would have been over time.
What, if any, losses relating to production or film activities?
Well, again, these other actors that we looked at, and there's a wide range of them. Some of them did bigger films and some of them did gigantic films. But it is very reasonable to assume that once you are in an Aquaman-style film, you'll either continue to do those, right? Some of these franchises, as we know, go 4, 5, 6 films, or she would probably have been in another studio film that had nothing to do with Aquaman. But again, so over the course of 5 years, it's very reasonable to consider that she would have been in at least one film a year at a minimum of $4 million, because that's what her precedent would have been had she renegotiated. And it's important to note that in her Justice League contract, if there is a Aquaman 3, her price is set at $4 million. So it's very reasonable to assume and to believe that if she did a film a year for 5 years at a minimum of $4 million a year without any negotiation, which probably would have happened, but let's just say that baseline, that would be another $20 million over that time frame.
What, if any, opinions do you have about Amber Heard's earning power over time?
That it would continue to rise. It's customary in the industry, as I've talked about earlier, that the negotiations, especially with her agents at William Morris, her fees would have gone higher. So I'm just using the baseline without any ability to foresee in the future that I already know she got negotiated for $4 million from Aquaman 3. So if we use that as a baseline minimum, but it very well would have gone up had her agents done the work that they wanted to do.
So combining all of these opinions and calculations that you've had, what, if any, range are the losses you are estimating for Amber Heard but for the Depp-Waldman statements?
Right, so again, it's really important that I looked at, and hopefully you understand this, that it's over time, right? So let's just say a minimum of 5 years that we're going to talk about these losses, and it could be more, but at minimum, if you look at the film, the television, and the endorsement contracts, it's very likely that Ms. Heard should have earned between $45 and $50 million over that time period.
Are all your opinions to within a reasonable degree of probability or certainty?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, let's go ahead and take our afternoon recess, ladies and gentlemen. Do not do any outside research and do not discuss this case with anybody.
May I sit down?
Yeah, you can step down. That's fine.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's all right. I appreciate it, ma'am. Go ahead. This reminder, court is still in session, please. All right, so let's come back at 4 o'clock. We can do that, all right?
Thank you.
4 o'clock.
How would you like it? Do you want me to forward it to you? Just take a screenshot of it and then move on. Bye.
All right, if we could have the witness. Okay, sure. While we do that, can we have the witness take this?
Your sound mixer?
Excuse me?
Your sound mixer?
Yes. All right, we're ready for jury?
Do I stand?
It's up to you. All right, you can be seated. All right, cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Miss Arnold.
Hello, how are you?
So you repeatedly testified about what you were asked as the Depp-Waldman statements. Miss, you don't have any knowledge whether Mr. Depp knew of the statements that Mr. Waldman made. Do you?
Only with association with Mr. Waldman, correct?
You don't know when the first time Mr. Depp learned about those statements?
I don't know.
No. And the association you're talking about is that Mr. Waldman worked from time to time as Mr. Depp's attorney, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, may we approach?
Okay.
All right, and I understand that you're testifying as a damages expert and wear two hats, talking both about Mr. Depp's damages and about Ms. Heard's purported damages. Let's talk about Ms. Heard's damages first. You understand that you have to testify as to damages that resulted from the Waldman statements, correct?
That was my analysis.
Most of your testimony, however, was just simply testimony about things that occurred after the Waldman statements.
That's what I was tasked with, yes.
Right. The mere fact that there were activities after the Waldman statements doesn't establish that the Waldman statements caused any damages, does it?
When you look at the time frame of when the Waldman statements came out and you look at what was going on with Ms. Heard's career prior to the statements and what happened after the statements, it's very clear to make that correlation that they were caused by those statements and the campaign that followed afterwards in terms of the negative social media.
All right, that's an interesting thing because the witness this morning actually described the notion of what's correlation and what's causation. And correlation does not imply causation, does it, ma'am?
I'm not an expert in semantics.
Okay. But you're an expert who is purporting to say that Ms. Heard lost between $45 and $50 million. And I'm trying to understand where you put the link between the Waldman statements and all the other activity that occurred since then.
As I stated and very clearly wanted to make sure that everybody understood was that it was a time frame between which the Waldman statements were made and the negative decline in her career started happening, and in discussions with her agents and her publicists, there was a very tight timeline and a very close link to when those statements came out and when everything started pulling away from Ms. Heard.
Right, but what you're talking about is just a link in time. You do not put any causal connection between what Mr. Waldman purportedly said and the damages that Ms. Heard purportedly suffered. You have no idea whether Mr. Waldman's statements caused any damage to Ms. Heard, do you?
Well, actually, both the words in the statements were used as hashtags in the campaign, as well as when the statistical and the investigative analysis was done on the social media campaign. It turned out that 1 in 4 of the statements had Waldman or Waldminian in them. So that was another connection that I was able to make between the defamatory statements and the negativity that the studios and the product endorsements and the television and the press connected as well.
All right, let's start with first principles. If they're true, they're not defamatory, correct?
Again, that's outside the scope of my
Okay.
expertise.
All right. Let's then go back to what you just testified to, and I think you said the Waldman statements appeared in hashtags.
I said words from the Waldman statements appeared in hashtags.
Right. And the hashtags that were analyzed, however, don't have the Waldman statements in the hashtag.
I've also seen them online myself.
Well, but the analysis that Mr. Schnell did, he looked at 4 of them, right?
That was Schnell's analysis, and I do believe I remember reading that, yes.
All right. And the 25% that you just raised, that's Mr. Schnell's analysis. You didn't do that. He did it.
Correct.
All right. So you know what Mr. Schnell did. And he didn't look at hashtags that contained the Waldman statement words. He looked at justice for Johnny Depp, right?
That's one of them, yes?
One of them, of the 1.2 million hits that you talked about, that was 900,000, 984,000.
Well, also in my conversations with Mr. Schnell, we talked about all the words that were in the statement that also appeared. So what he wrote in his report and what I had in my conversation may not have been the same thing.
Ma'am, I don't want to hear about your conversation with Mr. Schnell.
It's part of what I relied on, and I'm allowed to talk about that.
All right. So your conversation with Mr. Schnell, let's move beyond that and let's talk about what the other hashtags were. Amber Heard is an abuser. That's not in the Waldman statement, is it?
The fact that she was called a hoax can be related to Amber Heard as the abuser, but no, those words were not used, correct?
Right. And we just don't like Amber. That's not in the Waldman statement.
Correct.
All right. And Amber Turd is not in the Waldman statement.
Correct.
Right. None of those things are. And in terms of the use of the words fraud and hoax, that appeared in only 6.5% of the millions of tweets that Mr. Schnell analyzed, right?
I don't have his definition or his report in front of me, but we can look at it together if you'd like to.
Right. And you said Waldman appears in 25%. Waldman or Waldminian.
According to Mr. Schnell, yes.
No, all right. But if that's your only evidence, however, that any of this activity has any link to Mr. Waldman. Is that correct?
Well, no, we also look at the timeline because those campaigns were not active prior to the Waldman statements, and then they started appearing, so there's some connectivity there as well.
Mr. Depp bears no responsibility for the social media campaigns. He doesn't. If the social media campaigns caused Ms. Heard to lose her ability to generate income, that's not the Waldman statements. That's a social media campaign.
I'm going to object, Your Honor. May we approach?
Okay.
All right. So I'm just looking for all evidence of the causal connection that you claim exists between the $45 million in damages that you assert and the 3 statements made by Mr. Waldman.
Well, I also looked at Ms. Heard's career after the divorce proceedings and other lawsuits that she was either involved with or was discussed. And her career might have had a pause, but she was able to overcome that when she did Aquaman and she did The Stand, both very prominent productions. And there was no dramatic downturn in her career after any publicity.
Ma'am, I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you have notes with you?
No, there's dust.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
There's just dust, and I'm just distracting myself. I guess
I'm sorry.
It's just nerves. It's really just that. There's
that's
just
okay.
dust. Sorry.
So you looked at her career, and you looked at the way her career was moving.
Right. So as I was saying, her career was moving forward, and even she had been able to overcome the negative publicity surrounding the divorce or the initial filing of the UK lawsuit and the other lawsuits, anything that she was associated. She overcame that. She did Justice League, and she did Aquaman, and she did The Stand, and she got the L'Oreal contract all after that. The only time her career slowed down and stopped was at the same time that those defamatory statements came out.
But there was a lot of other activity that happened following the defamatory statements. You said every time Mr. Depp files a lawsuit, it ignites the fire around the both of them. Right?
No, I actually said it ignites the fire mostly around Mr. Depp. That was excuse me, please.
I'm sorry.
That was in context of when I was asked about Mr. Depp's career. That was not in context of when I was asked about Ms. Heard's career.
It's not the same fire?
It is and isn't. Who's the protagonist in the case in the UK was Mr. Depp. Ms. Heard was a witness to that case. She was not a part of the case. So most of the negative press went.
There was enormous amounts of negative activity around Ms. Heard as a result of the UK case. Isn't that true?
There was negativity, yes, about both of them in the case, yes.
Right. Substantial amounts of negativity.
Right.
Right? And so you can't tell me that that negativity isn't the thing that keeps or Ms. Heard from working.
Well, again, it was a close time frame. The negative statements were a much closer time frame to the press and publicity around Aquaman and The Stand than the UK case, which was months later. So, again, I will look at the defamatory statements as kind of the igniting force, and it was promoted and kind of more oxygen was put on the fire when the UK came out. So it kind of became a snowball effect of the match was lit and it kept getting stronger and stronger.
Right, but Ms. Heard isn't claiming a causal connection between the UK case and her damages, right?
No.
All right. And you can't distinguish between the UK bad publicity and the bad publicity that derived after the Waldman statements.
What time frame are you talking about with the bad publicity from the UK case, so we can at least be specific on time frames?
Well, you talked about a 5-year time window.
A 5-year time window from 2020 to the 2 years that we're at now, plus the 3 years moving forward, is what I talked about in terms of the time frame that it would take someone who's been under this much duress to kind of rehabilitate their career. That's when we talked about the 5 years.
Right, that's when you talked about the 5 years. So you look over this 5-year window, and during the period that precedes this window, there's lots and lots of negative press about Ms. Heard, irrespective of the Waldman statements, correct?
Before the Waldman statements, as I said, she was able to overcome that, and she got great jobs and was getting endorsement contracts.
Right, but after the Waldman statements, there is more activity in the press, there's more social media activity, and you cannot put a causal connection between that activity and what Mr. Waldman said.
It can be the instigating event, if you want me to call it that. We'll call the Waldman statements the instigating event of a torrential rain of social media tactics that has gone on for years, yeah.
The instigating event, and therefore your damage analysis with some degree, I guess, of reasonable certainty is that once there's an instigating event, everything that happens thereafter is fair game for damages?
Well, it's like a fire. If one tree burns and then more air or wind is added to it, then the next tree burns and the whole forest burns. But if that first fire hadn't started with the one tree, there would have been no loss of acreage. So you can look at it with that same analogy.
Trees burn one at a time, don't they, ma'am?
You know, I'm not a firefighter. I'm not going to go there with you. But obviously we know that a single match can cause thousands of acres to burn. So we can leave it at that.
I think I went there with you. All right, let's do this. You decided that there were a number of persons that you described as comparable in order to determine what Ms. Heard was likely to make over time, correct?
Yes.
All right. Of those comparable actors and actresses, is there a single one who has had any press suggesting that they defecated in the marital bed?
I don't know. I have no idea.
You would agree with me that that is a negative influence with respect to Hollywood.
If one believed it, yes.
Yeah, if one believed it, you know, it was reported. Yes?
Yeah, it certainly has been discussed. We don't have any proof or video of anybody defecating on the bed.
I certainly do not have proof video of anybody defecating in a bed. I'll give you that.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. But what you know is that Mr. Waldman didn't say anything about defecating in a bed.
Correct.
Right. So all of the bad publicity around that activity has nothing to do with Waldman, right?
Waldman, as you said, didn't talk about defecation.
Okay. And you haven't considered how that story has adversely impacted Miss Heard's career.
That story, you're going to ask me for a causal link between that poop story and her demise of her career? I can't. No, I'm not going to do that, nor can I.
You couldn't do it?
Can I make it? No, I can't.
Right. And you can't do it with Waldman's statements either, can you?
Well, again, I did, and I have, and I stand by them. So
you did by just pointing out the time frame are relatively close.
The time frame and the instigation and if you will, the rallying of the forces. Again, it's like a lit tree. It's going to ignite everything. It's like free game afterwards. So it was the instigating event, if you will, and that's what I looked at, yes.
All right. So from your perspective, anything that happened after Waldman that was negative to your client is attributable to Waldman and therefore attributable to the damage analysis that you made.
I was tasked with looking at that specifically, and that's what I was asked to limit it to. I was not asked to look at anything else.
All right. Jason Momoa. That's one of your comparables, right?
Yes.
He's been prominent since 1999. He was in Baywatch in 99. 44 episodes on Baywatch. Do you know that?
You can look it up if you did. I'll go with that.
Right. But you remember him on Baywatch.
Actually, I didn't watch Baywatch, but
right.
He certainly had the physique for it, so.
Stargate, Atlantis, he was on that. Many episodes.
Right?
Did you know that?
Yes.
Okay. He played Conan the Barbarian.
In TV or film?
Film.
Okay. I don't have Mr. Momoa's resume memorized, so.
No, I'm just trying to understand how you came to the conclusion they're comparable, because I just want to spend a few minutes talking about Mr. Momoa's career. Game of Thrones was one of the most popular things on TV for a period of 3 years, correct?
Yes, he was.
And he was in Game of Thrones.
Yes, he was.
Yep. And he's Aquaman, right?
Yes, he is.
Right. And he's the title character in Aquaman.
Yes.
Yeah. And he was actually Aquaman in a movie before the Aquaman movie started. Do
You mean
know
the
that?
Justice League and other things like that, yeah.
Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice. Wasn't he in that as Aquaman?
I didn't see that one.
Didn't see it.
No.
Miss Heard wasn't in that movie, was she?
Not that I know of, no.
No. And he was in both Justice League movies.
Correct?
And he's in Aquaman 2.
Yes.
They used him in the second Lego movie, right?
Yes.
He's one of the most heroic characters in the recent Dune blockbuster,
Which happened post Aquaman.
right? In fact, likely his character...
He's not the lead, though.
No.
In Dune, no, he's not the lead.
Did you ever read Dune?
Pardon?
Did you ever read Dune?
No, but I've seen the movie.
No. Do you understand whether his character will come back from the dead in the third movie?
As again, I didn't read the book, so he might. I don't know.
That might just-
We're just talking about that one movie.
That
So
might
that's
be a bit of a spoiler.
Oh, man. Dude.
He's one of the principal leads in the new Fast and Furious franchise movie Fast X, right?
I don't know that for sure, no.
Okay. But that's not the career path that Ms. Heard has had. She's never been the title character in a movie. She hasn't spent years on television. She did, 8 TV shows? 8 single episodes of TV?
Again, I don't have her resume. If you want to show it to me, we can count them together.
All right. Mr. Momoa remains well-liked even though he's engaged in a recent divorce from another actor. That's correct, right?
I don't know. I don't follow his fan base.
You don't follow Jason Momoa, but you use him as a comparable to come up with a $45 million
I said I don't follow
deal?
his fan base. I understand him as a prominent actor in the business, but I don't follow his fan base.
Isn't fan base one of the things that you analyze?
Of course, you can look at numbers, but I don't keep a watch on his social media feeds.
All right. All right. You indicated that Gal Gadot is in Wonder Woman.
Yes, she's a star.
She's in fact Wonder Woman.
I know, she's good too.
Yep. All right. She's the title character, and there've been now multiple Wonder Woman movies, right?
Yes?
Yeah. And even before that, she was in franchise films.
Which one are you referring to?
Fast and Furious.
Excuse me, I honestly don't remember her being that as one of the main characters. I know it's The Rock and
You
that whole crew.
didn't even know she was in the Fast and Furious franchise.
I've seen it on her resume, but I didn't. I'm not a fan of the Fast and Furious.
All right. You'll agree with me that Wonder Woman is a more prominent role than Mira?
If you're going to talk about apples to apples in that exact movie, yes.
All right. What about, does Mira have any, self-titled franchise films?
Not yet.
No. And Ms. Gadot played a much bigger role in the movie they were in together, the Justice League movie.
In what movie they were in together? Oh, in Justice League?
Yeah.
I haven't counted the screen time, so I can't really say.
Okay. You indicated that another person that you compared Ms. Heard with is Zendaya.
Zendaya, yeah.
Person so famous she goes by one name.
I guess when you have a name that's a Z, it works, I guess.
All right. She's been on the Disney Channel since she's 13 years old.
Right.
Right? She's won an Emmy.
Yes, she did.
Right. She was singing and dancing and swimming from trapezes in The Greatest Showman, right?
Yes.
Yeah. She's now been in multiple Spider-Man movies.
Yes.
She's 10 years younger than your client.
Right.
Yeah. But this is a person that you deemed incomparable.
Well, as I was explaining to you how I chose them, when you look at superhero characters, there's not that many to pull from. So I worked on pulling characters that were in superhero movies that were about the same age range within 10 years, as you've noted to me, thank you. And also just where her career would have gone. I said that they were comparable, they're not identical. So you can just look at what their career has done either before that superhero movie, then in others, or the one they were in, and then you look at where her career should have gone. Even though she may not have been at the stature of a Zendaya at that time, you can still look at it as a comparable trajectory of what happens when you're in a blockbuster movie. It's just a reference point. It's not meant to be identical. They're not meant to be the same people, or not even have the exact same career. It's meant to be a reference point. Simple as that.
So far, everybody we've looked at have been in more blockbuster movies than Ms. Heard.
But Ms. Heard was also in the biggest blockbuster movie, and the light that shines on Jason Momoa will also shine on her. So you have to look at it in context of the biggest movie that DC
in the
Comics
DC
is.
universe.
And also one of the biggest box office films ever, probably within the top 10, because I've looked at it, right? So that light was going to shine brighter on her than someone who wasn't in that movie. And again, it would have just helped her in her career move forward, not stalled it and in her world be silent afterwards.
For the jury to accept your damage analysis, they would have to agree with you that Ms. Heard was on the precipice of a meteoric rise. That's the word you used, right?
Actually, no, I didn't. I did use meteoric with someone like, let's say, Gal Gadot or Zendaya, but I actually gave you a range and gave the jury a range that they weren't all going to have a meteoric rise. Some of them would be smaller, right? And so what the numbers that I gave you do not represent a meteoric rise. A meteoric rise is when Jason Momoa goes from, I don't know, $4 million, $5 million to a $50 million payday. That's a meteoric shift in our business. But when someone has contracts that actually go from $1 million to the first one, $2 million, and then $4 million, that is standard for a franchise that is perceived to do well. And so I based those calculations on very specific numbers that were already contracted. I wanted to stay within reality and look at the numbers that were already contracted for Ms. Heard and just move out forward on one film a year, maybe a TV show here or there, and some endorsement contracts, which is very typical for an actor in our business to make that kind of money. It just is what happens.
So the example you just used is somebody went from $1 million to $2 million to $4 million. Your client has never had a contract that exceeds $2 million, correct?
Incorrect.
All right.
In the Aquaman it's actually the Justice League contract because they're associated. So Justice League, Aquaman, she was paid $1 million. Then in Aquaman 2, it was written that she was going to earn $2 million. And if there's another one, it was written in the terms that she would get $4 million. So it actually was a contract that Ms. Heard signed with the studio.
Right, but the movie hasn't been made.
Aquaman 2 hasn't even come out yet, so the
Right.
third one is still on deck, as they say.
Yeah. Okay. Let's put it differently. Your client's never been paid $2 million for a movie she appeared in.
She was paid $2 million for Aquaman.
Right.
Aquaman 2.
And she's never been paid $4 million.
She was contracted to be paid, and when the movie goes, that's what she will be paid. So that's what I said. She was
If
on
she's in the movie.
Right, but if Aquaman 2 does even nearly as well as Aquaman 1, there's going to most likely be a third one. So we can look at that as a precedent that was set in writing, actually.
If a movie makes $795 million, you think there's likely to be a next one?
If it was the first or the second one, but if it's the fifth in the series, I assume that you're referring to Pirates 5. It performed well at the box office, yes, but certainly not in comparison to some of the other ones. And that's what a studio like Disney will look at to say, has that franchise had its run? Or do we need to change it?
A studio
or stop
like
it?
Disney wants to walk away from an $800 million payday?
Well, an $800 million payday has to be put into context to the budget that it costs to get that movie and then the marketing thereafter. And with the increasing costs of not only Mr. Depp's fee or any of the, and plus the other actors' fees, plus general production costs that are getting more expensive, then you put in the marketing costs, which are sometimes 1, 2, or 3 times the budget of the film. A film like that, a studio can spend $600-800 million just making and marketing the film. So $795 million is a lot of money, and it seems like a really good box office, but you have to put into perspective of what's spent on production, marketing, and the overhead costs that the studio takes. So you have, again, it's all in context of what the budget of the film and the marketing of the film is.
All right, let's put some more things in context. Ana de Armas, that's another one you used.
Yes.
All right. She's most recently, I guess, in Deep Water with Ben Affleck.
I don't, again, I know some of the movies that she's been in. I don't remember about Deep Water. I don't even know if that's out yet,
Okay.
to be honest.
She was in the last James Bond movie.
Yes, she was.
Yeah. They were talking about making her the next female Bond, right?
Right, after her big Stars Born moment, yeah, she's gotten a lot more big roles, which is what we had hoped for Miss Heard.
Yeah. And she said that her breakout role was Blade Runner?
It was like the first big, studio movie that got a lot of attention. I believe that was the one that we can look at as a marker for her, sure.
Did you watch Blade Runner 2049?
I did.
Do you know what she did in the movie?
It was years ago. I don't remember exactly what she was in, what role she played, but she was in that movie, and from that, her agents used that as leverage to get her more movies.
You have no knowledge that her principal role in that movie was as a gigantic naked billboard?
Are you saying that's the only thing she was? She was a gigantic naked billboard. She wasn't in the
That's
movie.
the principal role in that movie.
I don't remember the movie well enough to know.
Okay. And did you know that she was? I talked a little bit about Ben Affleck, right?
Right.
He's an interesting example because he's been in a role that's been recast multiple times. You know that role?
Are we talking about Batman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Batman.
Sure.
All right. So the title character in that DC series has seen how many actors?
Several.
Right. Michael Keaton,
He was Batman.
Val Kilmer.
You're a movie buff, yeah.
Yeah. Christian Bale was Batman.
I think he was. You're right.
George Clooney was Batman.
Definitely.
Yeah. I guess Robert Pattinson is now Batman.
Don't know.
Okay. But you're taking an absolutely iconic role that the DC universe has recast 4, 5, 6 times, correct?
Correct.
So that just because you have the role in the first movie or the second movie doesn't mean you get it in the third movie or the fourth movie.
Unless it's contractual.
Right. Unless it's contractual. So, now, let's look. Ana de Armas, she's like the new Marilyn Monroe on Netflix, too, right?
I believe so. She was also in Knives Out, which is probably even a bigger breakout role for her. But
Right.
again, I chose Blade Runner because it's a similar thing. You have to start somewhere. But Knives Out probably was her big moment in time.
Yeah. All right. The other person you picked was Chris Pine. Chris Pine is in a superhero movie, Wonder Woman.
He is in Wonder Woman. He's also, well, Star Trek being a blockbuster, but not necessarily a superhero, right?
Yeah. He was in both Wonder Woman movies, right?
Yes, he plays the love interest to Gal Gadot, yeah.
Yeah. On Star Trek, in the Star Trek franchise, he plays Captain Kirk, right?
I don't remember exact role that he played. I didn't see it in the movie. I just know it from his resume, to be honest.
Do you know who Captain Kirk is?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Well,
But you
I know
didn't
who the
know that
character is.
Chris Pine is Captain Kirk in Star Trek?
I hate to say I'm not a Star Trek fan.
Okay. But you used Mr. Pine as an example, irrespective of the fact that you didn't even know he starred in this franchise film?
I did know that he starred. That's why I used it. Again,
In fact, he was the most prominent person in the movie.
we can go over this a couple more times, and I'm happy to do so. All I wanted to do was look at, from a small pool of people that have been in huge franchise movies or superhero movies, and give you a sense of what the range is or what someone's trajectory can be. Again, they are not apples and apples. They're not both green apples or both red apples. I just was looking at a range. It's what we do. It's what we do in the industry. It's what you do to kind of get a sense of how much you're going to pay an actor, what they're worth in the foreign markets and the domestic
Ma'am, I think
markets.
my question was, did you know whether he was in Star Trek?
Yes, and you were asking me why I chose him, which is what this conversation is about. And again, I chose him because he was part of Star Trek and Wonder Woman, but mostly because he was in Wonder Woman. And I don't know the exact time frame of which came first, but the fact that he's in both of them is consistent with what actors of this ilk tend to do once they're in a movie like this.
But you talked about breakout roles, but you don't know which was his breakout role.
Chris Pine's been an actor. He's been a well-liked actor. He was in both Star Trek and in Wonder Woman. And
Did a
Star
movie
Trek,
with Denzel Washington?
Pardon?
Did a movie with Denzel Washington?
He's had a good career.
Yeah, great career.
Yeah.
Yeah, much longer career than Ms. Hurt, right?
She was on the precipice of a great career.
Yeah.
She hasn't had the chance to negotiate for that yet or be in those movies yet, so we don't know yet.
We're getting back to precipice. Didn't you just deny precipice a few minutes ago? I thought your testimony was she was on the precipice of meteoric rise. You said, I guess.
I didn't say meteoric. I said consistent. I don't know. She could have a meteoric rise, but I was talking about consistent with Miss Heard.
All right. So of the actors you selected, 2 of them are the title characters in their DC movies. One
is Aquaman. Who's the other title character?
Gal Gadot.
Wonder Woman, right.
Right.
She's Wonder Woman. And you mean Jason Momoa, sure. Yeah.
So you get 2 title characters. You got James Kirk, and those are the people that you thought were most representative of Ms. Heard.
Again, there are not that many in the pool to pick from. I'm not going to put comparable actors that haven't been in either large, what we call tentpole movies, or franchise movies, or superhero movies. So I wanted to work within those parameters, and that's what I did. So those are the actors I chose, yes. And to show what type of work happens when you're in a big movie and what happens afterwards.
When you say comparable, every one of the actors you chose had a much longer TV career than Ms. Heard.
Again, they were all in superhero or franchise movies that did very, very well at the box office.
And there are tons of actors and actresses who are in superhero movies that don't have meteoric rises thereafter, correct?
Not when they're the lead character with Jason Momoa, but to your point, there are many actors that have no career prior to a breakout role and then have a meteoric career and have had no career prior. So you don't always just look at the past. It's helpful, and with Miss Heard, she had good reviews, so that's what I looked at. But if you look at other actors and they have their first role and all of a sudden they become a superstar from one role. So that happens in our business. It just does.
All right. With respect to your comparable actors, you have no personal knowledge as to how much any of them were compensated over the period you reviewed.
Incorrect.
You have personal knowledge as to who?
Jason Momoa.
And you derive that personal knowledge from talking to somebody?
Yes.
He didn't tell you.
His agent did.
Okay. So what you will rely on what Mr. Momoa's agent told you, but you have no knowledge. You didn't see the contract.
No, his agent is at William Morris as well, so they told me that.
Right. And you've never seen anybody else's contracts as to what they were making.
No, but in 25 years of being in this business, I understand the basis of which actors are paid when they're in blockbuster films and then they're in large budgeted studio films. So it's not a leap to kind of understand where the actor's making. And again, I really didn't want to try to be speculative in my analysis. I wanted to work with the numbers that Amber had contracted for already and just take it from there and said if she had done one movie a year and one series and done product endorsement, that's how I got to the number. So I wasn't looking to take her on a meteoric rise. I wasn't looking to give her the same career as Jason Momoa. I took her numbers that her agents had actually negotiated and worked from there.
When you say you weren't trying to give her the same career as Jason Momoa, the TV program that she most recently did, The Stand, she made $200,000 an episode. That's what you testified to.
Correct.
And in your damage analysis, you give her $1 million an episode had the Waldman statements not occurred. And you do it only because you believe Mr. Momoa has gotten that in something that he's in.
Right.
So you are giving her the same career as Jason Momoa.
Well, again, with someone like Ms. Heard, who was in a blockbuster film with the team at William Morris, in my discussions with William Morris, that's what they were looking to negotiate for her on other projects. So I got some of that information from her management team directly.
So her agents were looking to get her as much money as possible?
I think that's the job of an agent. They usually try to get the most money as possible.
Your testimony is they were looking to get the money for her, but you need somebody willing to pay on the other side of that deal, don't you?
Right, but agents are working with people in the industry and have a pulse on have a finger on a pulse of what's going on, so they know who's marketable and what the prices that all the streamers are paying these days.
You haven't seen a single one of the endorsement contracts that you referenced, other than Ms. Heard's?
No, other than, again, what I was talking to William Morris in terms of the pricing that they are aware of, not only for their own clients, but what's out in the marketplace, and it's pretty consistent. And I've also worked with other actors on other cases that have gotten similar contracts, so I'm familiar with the rates of endorsement contracts.
You haven't made any reference to the actual earnings of any of these actors.
Again, as you do an analysis, you put together the numbers that you know from both your experience and the marketplace and the agents that are working in the marketplace. So together, that's how I created those numbers, and mostly using Ms. Heard's numbers specifically and giving her a very steady career, which is what she had had prior to Aquaman.
Yeah, and you don't have the prior earnings of any of the actors you looked at other than Ms. Heard's.
No, I don't have all the contracts now.
You don't have any of that information.
I'm sorry?
You don't have any of that information?
No.
Okay. In fact, that information, I guess aside from Mr. Momoa's, is confidential, right?
Usually it is, yes.
Yeah. And the only reason you know anything about Mr. Momoa is that Ms. Heard shares an agent? Or an agency?
Right, but I've also been in the industry for many years, and I know what actors get paid. I talk about budgets constantly, so it's not a secret within the industry the amount that actors in those types of movies are paid very, very well.
You're not currently working as an agent for anyone, are you?
No.
All right. So, the salaries of these comparable actors, did they form some basis for your opinion?
No.
Okay. So your opinion, as I understand it, is that Ms. Heard should have been able to renegotiate an existing contract.
Which is standard in the industry as well as with her agent specifically.
Do you know if it's standard with Warner Brothers?
I'm sorry?
Do you know if it's standard with Warner Brothers?
I don't know if it's standard at any of the studios, but it is standard for agents to renegotiate, and oftentimes are successful when the film is done so well.
Right, but what you're talking about is there's an existing contract where Ms. Heard has made a promise that she will do the next movie for, in this instance, $2 million, right?
Right.
And the agent is trying to do is to get Warner Brothers to say, hey, you should pay her more than your contract says because you like her?
Well, as Ms. Kovacevic said, also, it's standard in the industry. As again, I've been in the industry, I've worked with agents, and I've worked with lots of lawyers, and we have conversations about what is an actor getting, or what can they do, or what are they going to do the next time. So again, it's a standard in practice in the industry, especially when a film is as successful as Aquaman, that the agents will go back and renegotiate. In fact, that was conversation.
Isn't the standard practice is that they would try to renegotiate, but it's up to the studio?
Sure, but oftentimes in a movie of such of the nature of Aquaman, they're very successful, usually.
But the entirety of your analysis assumes a renegotiation with a studio for terms that are double what the studio had already got a promise from Ms. Heard she would work for.
Correct.
All right. Have you talked to Walter Hamada?
Have I spoken to him?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Do you know who he is?
Yes.
Who is he?
He's a senior executive at Warner Brothers, or yeah, I think he still is there, but certainly at the time of the renegotiation, he was a senior executive.
And do you know whether he's the president of DC-based film productions?
I think that's exactly his title, yeah.
Who's in a better position to determine whether Warner Brothers would renegotiate, you or Mr. Hamada?
Again, I based this on the agents that were talking to Warner Brothers about Mr. Momoa, and they were wanting to talk to them about Miss Heard as well.
Okay, I'm not
so
sure.
I based my information on them. So the connection should be Mr. Hamada or the agents, not Mr. Hamada and me.
All right. Who's in a better position to know whether Warner Brothers would renegotiate?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Just asking.
I'll sustain the objection. Next
Sorry.
question.
Do you review any testimony from Mr. Hamada?
I did.
Did you understand that Mr. Hamada says that they want to hold the lawyers, hold the actors to their deals?
That was a philosophy that he said Warner Brothers had, yes.
Yeah. Did you understand that Mr. Hamada said that nothing Mr. Depp did impacted her compensation?
I don't remember that part of the testimony. You have it available for me to read?
You don't know whether Mr. Hamada testified. Did anything Mr. Depp said about Amber Heard affect her compensation?
Again, I don't
remember. That's okay.
I don't recall that testimony.
Right.
No.
Do you know whether Mr. Hamada indicated whether he even knew who Adam Waldman was?
Again, I don't remember the conversation about Hamada and Waldman or Depp.
And you don't remember whether Mr. Hamada made any statements as to whether anything Mr. Waldman said affected Ms. Heard's compensation?
In my experience, studios don't talk about how or why they make decisions based on publicity or conversations. They're not going to try. They're going to be very protective of all their relationships. So that's just natural.
Yeah, unless you can get him to testify under oath at a deposition, right?
Well, even so, they're not going to say anything negative. They may bypass it by being positive, but they're not going to do anything that could potentially damage a relationship that may change or be worthwhile in the future. So that's just what a studio person does.
Mr. Hamada is in the best position to determine whether there were chemistry issues with Ms. Heard.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
He's the president of the company.
Overruled.
I don't know how involved Mr. Hamada was on a daily basis in terms of chemistry, but I do know that Warner Brothers did a chemistry test with Ms. Heard and Mr. Momoa before she even got the role. She went in and did what they call a chemistry test. So that was to actually see whether there was good chemistry between them. And evidently there was good chemistry because she was then hired to be the romantic interest. So whatever Mr. Hamada said during his deposition, I look at what actually happened in real life, which is she got the chemistry test and then she got the job.
Yeah, let's look what happened in real life. She went in before and took the test. Then she made a movie. Then there was an existing movie under which Warner Brothers could then decide whether there was chemistry, right?
The movie worked. It made over $1 billion, and they're all over the poster. If they didn't think that there was chemistry, they wouldn't have put Ms. Heard on the poster next to Mr. Momoa. So,
you know there were multiple posters for the Aquaman movie.
Yes, there always are. That's standard.
And that 3 out of the 4 posters, the standard posters for Aquaman, didn't even feature Miss Heard.
Right. So when you make a poster at the studio, it's normal to have 3 or 4 variations because you want to appeal to different people's perspectives. So you want the romantic poster, you want the action poster, you want the superhero poster. So it's normal for them to have many posters, but the romantic poster was of Ms. Heard and Mr. Momoa.
Right. And all the others are just of Mr. Momoa.
Like we talked about, it's Aquaman, but she was prominent in the ones that Warner Brothers wanted to appeal to women and to the romantic interest of the consumer.
Right. What movies would Ms. Heard have gotten absent Mr. Waldman's statements?
Well, the ones we know about specifically that she was in conversations with was a movie with Gail Garcelle Bernal, I believe that's how you say his name, at Amazon, which is what Ms. Kovacevic said. And she was also in consideration for a movie called Ambulance with Michael Bay. But again, after the Waldman statements, nobody would talk to the agents, and so they weren't able to garner more. Oh, she also had a movie that she was interested in producing that a good friend of hers, or a friend of hers, or colleague, was doing. So there was at least those 3 that I read about.
Those were 3 movies that she was being considered for, but you don't know what movie she was going to be in.
Well, again, they stopped the conversation after the statement, so we don't know where they would have gone, of course. But she was in consideration for all of them, and given her fame from Aquaman, that would have helped all those movies. So it would have made a lot of sense.
You're projecting movies way out into the future that you have no knowledge would ever have gotten made.
Well, that's what we do when you talk about comparables and economic damages. You talk about the future. That's standard in our industry as a forensic expert and in the industry. That's how movies are financed, as a matter of fact, is by forecasting what happens in the future.
What connection do you draw between Mr. Waldman's statements and the reported reduction in Ms. Heard's Aquaman 2 role?
Again, it's the timing of it all. It's the timing of it all. And also, they were going to take her out of the movie after the statements, and then they put her back in. And then can I talk about the emails that I read? I'm not sure at this point, but.
So, when you say they were going to take her out of the movie, when you have an option, you literally have the option whether to include the actress, right? That's what it means.
Correct.
Right. So they can choose to exercise the option or not exercise the option. Entirely up to them.
Correct.
And they have, that particular studio, to your knowledge, has repeatedly recast even major figures in their DC movies.
We talked about Batman.
What about Superman?
You know, I'm not. I think I'm more familiar with the Batman actors. I think there have been a couple actors of Superman, but depending on how the movie performed, if a movie doesn't perform, they'll look for other actors. Or if they want to go a different direction or reboot a franchise, they will look at different actors. So if the movie's successful, they're not likely to change the actors, especially not in the second one or the third one.
Another reason they'll look for a different actor or actress if the actor or actress is charged or asking too much money to play the role again, correct?
Yes, not in figures under $10 million, but yes.
Yeah. If you're asking for too much money, you might not get your role again. And your analysis assumes that Ms. Heard could double her money.
Well, her contracts doubled her money from each one to the next, so it wasn't that large a leap to do that, especially when the agents had told me that that was what had been they were considering and what they'd been discussing.
All right. Have you seen the script of Aquaman 2?
Personally?
Yeah.
I did see a draft. I don't know what the date was or when it was or where in the succession of the rewrites it was. I did see one draft, yes.
You don't know what Warner Brothers has in mind for that movie in terms of the kind of movie it's going to be?
It's a superhero movie.
Right. It's supposed to be like a buddy comedy, right?
I don't know. I don't know about a buddy comedy. It's an action movie, superhero movie. I don't know.
Who's Patrick Wilson?
Patrick Wilson. I've heard that name in terms of an actor, but I don't know Mr. Wilson.
All right. Do you know if he appears in Aquaman?
Again, I don't know him by name. If you want to show me a picture, I can, or a clip from the movie.
All right. Do you know if Mr. Wilson appears more frequently in Aquaman than your client does?
I didn't count the screen time when I watched the movie. It was a long, even when I watched it again, I didn't count the screen time of anybody else.
All right. Did you read the testimony of Mr. Hamada?
We discussed that, yes.
You disregarded all of it in your analysis as to her ability to renegotiate, correct?
Well, I remember the part where Mr. Hamada said that from time to time they will break their philosophy and renegotiate. It's what they did with Jason Momoa and with Gal Gadot. So, it coincides with what we know in the industry, which is it can be done.
It's what they did with the two title characters in the DC universe.
Again, I've worked in the business for a long time, and I've seen a lot of actors renegotiate their careers. I'm sorry, not their careers. Renegotiate their fees. It's common practice, and it's certainly what the agent will think about first when a movie makes $1 billion+.
Right. Again, focused on the agent, but it's the studio that pays the bills.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Your Honor, I have a fair amount more to do.
Continue.
I'm sorry?
Continue.
Okay. I didn't know if we were going to 5:30 today or not.
Every day is 5:30 day.
Okay. We may not even need to get there.
Every day is 5:30 day.
All right. Perfect. All right. You talked about Ms. Heard's endorsement deal with L'Oreal.
Yes.
All right. And that L'Oreal has concerns about using her because every time they try to use her, people respond negatively to her.
People don't. The Depp fan base has responded, have posted negative things about Ms. Heard on their campaigns.
So, did you say the Depp fan base?
Well, people that were using the hashtags that were consistent with the rest of the Depp fan base.
Yeah, but there are people posting negative things that, other than things that came from Mr. Waldman, correct?
I haven't seen all the. I was just looking at what L'Oreal discussed and what L'Oreal said in their communications.
All right. They made. Do you see L'Oreal make a word cloud of the words that were most commonly associated with Ms. Heard in its marketing campaigns?
I knew they did that. I didn't see it myself, actually.
Right. Do you know what words there were?
Again, no.
Okay. You didn't talk much about this, but in order to get to the damage analysis that you got, the $45 million, I think at least initially you suggested that Ms. Heard would have a role producing and starring in a movie, and that she would make $12 million.
I've talked about that, but in the latest calculation, that was really less what I considered and more about what films and TV and endorsement deals that she would do. The producing was something that she had wanted to do, and again, Mr. Momoa got that, so that's where the agents were discussing those figures with me.
The last movie that she has a production credit for is in 2013, right?
Again, I haven't memorized her resume.
It was a movie called Syrup. Did you ever hear of it?
No. Aside from having probably seen it on her IMDb.
And Soon the Darkness, that's her other production credit, right?
I'll if you say so. If you're reading it off of her resume, I will believe you, yes.
2010?
Okay.
All right. 12 years ago. But you, at least at some portion of at some point in this analysis, were of the mind that she would recover $12 million with a producing role and a starring role in a movie? Because that's what Mr. Momoa got.
Again, the agents were just saying that those were the kinds of numbers they were looking at to help her as she moved forward in her producing career.
Right. Those are the kind of the numbers the agents would like her to get.
Right, but again, I didn't use that in the final analysis of my $45 million, so it was just a discussion point because that's what the agents wanted me to consider.
All right. All right. You have testified that the breakout role for Miss Heard was Aquaman, right?
I didn't say the breakout role, but I used it as a movie that it was a superhero kind of super box office success. I think that some of her other critically acclaimed movies probably helped her break into that role, which would have been The Danish Girl, and then her work in Justice League, which was a natural progression to getting to star in Aquaman.
All right, but I used breakout. Perhaps you didn't, but this is the movie that springboards her to the kind of money that you are suggesting she should earn.
It should have, yes.
Yeah. And other than Aquaman, which was released in 2018, how many movies has she booked?
Well, she booked Aquaman 2.
Right.
And she did The Stand, which was a significant television show.
Right. But outside of the Aquaman franchise, she obtained only one movie role, since 2018, right?
Right. The industry also knows that she's planned to be on that next movie, and they understand her production schedule, so she's not going to go after films that would conflict with a mega box office movie. So there's scheduling and conflict issues as well that she and her team would consider.
So when was Aquaman released in 2018? It's December.
It was either December 2018 and then it depends on where it was in the world. It started in December 2018 and then it moved out, into 2019.
How many months between December 2018 and the Waldman statements went by?
12, I think, 15 or 16 if my math is correct.
Right. She got one role during that 15 or 16 month period, during the entirety of the post-Aquaman boost, right?
She got Stand.
Right.
And then she was in discussions for the films as they were getting ready to go.
But she didn't get another role for 16 months between the release of Aquaman and what you say are the Waldman statements.
Well, she got The Stand.
Right. She got one TV role.
A pretty significant TV role, yes, for a Stephen King novel.
Right. She was in a movie, though.
I'm sorry?
She was in a movie that was released after Aquaman.
What movie are you referring to?
Gully?
Oh, well, I don't know when that was shot, so you'd have to tell me when it was shot. Movies get released at different time frames. Like, they can be shot in 2016 and not get released till 2018. So you'd have to tell me. We'd have to look at, the actual filming dates of the Gully for me to talk to you about that.
She wasn't initially cast in Gully, was she?
I'm not familiar with the casting process of Gully.
All right. Do you know who Alice Eve is?
Who?
Alice Eve.
Alice Eve. Sounds familiar, but I'm not recalling who she is.
She's an actress, been in any number of movies. You don't know who she is?
Again, I know her name, but I don't know her resume.
She's in Star Trek.
Great.
Right. She was in one of those breakout roles, Star Trek, but you don't even know who she is.
I talked to you about Star Trek before. I'm not a big Star Trekian.
Okay. Ms. Heard replaced Alice Eve in the movie Gully, right?
I don't know the casting process. I don't know who's starring that movie.
Do you know what she was paid?
Who?
Ms. Heard.
For Gully?
Yeah.
Can you tell me when that was in? No, I don't. But what was the filming date of, and what was the start date of Gully?
You didn't look at the Gully contract when you were making an analysis of Ms. Heard's damages?
I don't recall whether I looked at it or not.
Did you understand that she was making $2,190 per week for Gully?
Can you tell me when it was shot? When does that contract get negotiated? It's relevant.
The contract is negotiated prior to the release of Aquaman.
Okay.
So she signs this contract for $2,190. Do you know what the Screen Actors Guild low budget agreement minimum scale is?
It changes from year to year. It depends on what year and what the size of the budget. There's actually 3 or 4 different scale, benchmarks. So when there's a low budget, it can be a micro budget, it can be a minimum budget. At low budget, there's like 4 or 5 different scales that they use when it gets to anything other than a studio film.
Yeah.
And oftentimes actors do passion projects, and that has nothing to do with, or something that they really love to do, or they think that would be good for the career. It doesn't have anything to do with the fee made on the film.
All right. What's a loan out?
A loan out? A loan out is the corporation that an actor will use so that their money comes in through a corporation, and then that corporation technically loans out the actor's services to the production. So the loan out is the corporation that the actor uses, and then they loan out the services to the production company. It's just really for tax purposes.
Do you know of any movie that Ms. Heard booked immediately prior to Aquaman other than Gully?
Well, I know she did Justice League.
Right.
I don't remember the dates and times of the filming of the other ones. You always have to look at the filming dates.
Right. You talked about Mr. Schnell. Gully was in his chart, right?
I don't remember where Gully was.
Right. Did you look closely at his chart?
Pardon?
Did you look closely at his chart?
At Mr. Schnell's chart?
Yeah.
I looked at the numbers with respect to the social media campaigns is what I was looking at Mr. Schnell for.
Okay. Do you know whether any of the dates of the Waldman statements even appear in Mr. Schnell's chart?
I don't remember.
Okay. You talked a little bit about Q scores and Mr. Bonya. Do you remember that?
Yes.
For Ms. Heard, Mr. Banya used Q scores from immediately after Aquaman, right?
Again, if you want to show me something, I can answer it. I don't remember every word of Mr. Banya's, but I remember talking about the dates with you earlier.
All right. But you don't know as you sit here today whether the Q scores that Mr. Banya used were after Aquaman but before the Waldman statements?
He used a couple different scores based on dates. I don't remember if they were correlated to the statements or not. I remember years more than anything else. Again, I looked at thousands and thousands of pages of documents, so I don't remember exactly what his said.
Even before the Waldman statements, Ms. Heard had very high negative Q scores. Isn't that correct?
Very negative high Q scores?
No, very high negative Q
As
scores.
I said, very high negative Q scores. I remember discussions of a lot of Q scores. I don't remember exactly what or when, which score, or whether it was
So in your analysis, you didn't consider Ms. Heard's negative Q scores as a restraint on what she might earn on a going forward basis?
No, Q scores change all the time. Ms. Heard's IMDb score has been 1, and it's been 300. Mr. Depp's Q score has been 1, and it's been 253. You know, Q scores change all the time. Scores change all the time. They're based on current events and movie releases.
You talked a little bit about Mr. Depp's damages. Did you talk, who's Jerry Bruckheimer?
Who's Jerry Bruckheimer? The producer of the Pirates franchise. Well, he's a huge producer of a lot of movies, but he happens to be the producer of the Pirates franchise.
You didn't talk to him prior to your testimony?
Personally, no.
No. And you didn't have other people talk to him on your behalf, did you?
Me personally, no. I did not talk to Mr. Bruckheimer.
And you've never spoken with Mr. Bruckheimer about why Mr. Depp has not appeared in a 6 pirate movie?
There has been no 6 pirate movie. There is not a Pirates movie titled Pirate 6 yet.
Right.
Or ever.
But you haven't talked to Mr. Bruckheimer as to whether Mr. Depp was going to appear in the movie?
From things that I've read in newspaper publications and emails, I've read that Mr. Bruckheimer was uncertain whether Mr. Depp would star in.
Right. But you haven't talked to him. And you've never spoken with Sean Bailey about this, right?
No.
Or anyone at Disney?
I actually put a call into somebody at Disney, and they didn't want to talk on the record.
All right, you called somebody at Disney and they didn't want to talk to you.
No, again, as I said, studios don't want to talk about their stars, whether they want to preserve a relationship that may or may not be used in the future. So it's their tendency not to talk about people they are in business with.
So you have no personal knowledge why Mr. Depp hasn't made a 6 pirate movie?
Well, as I said, there is no 6 pirate movie.
Right. But you don't know why. You have no personal knowledge why.
I don't work at Disney now.
Did you listen to Mr. Wiggum's testimony in this trial?
I read Mr. Wiggum's testimony.
And Mr. Wiggum said Mr. Depp had a deal for the movie, right?
I think Mr. Wiggum did. The other agent, Mr. Carino, said he did not. And as there is no Pirates movie, there have been no deals negotiated, and that's what Ms. Jacobs also testified to.
But Mr. Wiggum testified to something else.
It doesn't correlate, as we say, to the other 2 agents' testimony.
You've indicated that a portion of the reason that Mr. Depp has received a variety of negative comments in Hollywood is that he engages in lawsuits.
One of the elements that has contributed to a lot of negative press and attention is due to the lawsuits, and the activity and the behaviors that we talked about earlier have been brought into the limelight.
Mr. Depp's lawsuit here has generated negative publicity for Ms. Heard, correct?
Yes.
That lawsuit, until she's filed a counterclaim, didn't relate to the Waldman statements, did it?
Mr. Depp's lawsuits?
Yeah.
No, we talked about that. It was pertaining to the her op-ed piece.
Right. It related to what
Pardon?
Ms. Heard said.
I'm sorry?
This Mr. Depp's lawsuit relates to what Ms. Heard said and not to what Mr. Waldman said.
Not what, well, it related to the op-ed piece that Ms. Heard wrote.
Right. So Mr. Waldman's statements have no connection to the negative publicity that Ms. Heard has received relative to this trial, correct?
Objection calls for speculation, foundation, hearsay, and outside the scope.
Any response?
We're looking for a causal connection here.
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Yeah. When was the last time you met with Ms. Heard?
I only met Ms. Heard at lunch today.
Okay, that's the first time you talked to her.
First time I met her.
Okay. What's your compensation for testifying here today?
For testimony, it's $650 an hour.
What has been your compensation to date for providing the assistance that you have in this case?
I've been working on the case for about 3 years, and over the 3 years, I believe it's around $60,000.
You said 60?
Yeah, over 3 years.
All right. I have no further questions.
All right, redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor, and I'm going to make it definitely fit within that 5:30. Ms. Arnold, you were asked a number of questions about the different social media, the negative, and how do you know that it relates to the Waldman-Depp statements? Do you recall all those questions?
Yes.
Okay. The social media that was connected, and some of that was your testimony, some Jessica Kovacevic, and some of it was Mr. Schnell, actually tracked the language from the 3 statements from Waldman, correct?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Okay. What, if any, efforts were made to track the negative social media that caused the damages that you've attributed?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
So L'Oreal did a lot of research. William Morris did a lot of research. Mr. Schnell did a lot of research. And in those conversations, those were also connective tissues to the negative social media campaign and the Waldman statements.
All right. And they connected back to those 3 statements, correct?
Yes.
Objection leading.
And what, if any, connection did they have to those 3 statements?
Again, we talked about this earlier. We talked about some of the hashtags being similar. We talked about the Waldman or the Waldminion. So there were a lot of connective tissues between the negative social media campaigns and the Waldman statements.
Okay. And I'm going to jump because I think this is part of this. So you were asked some questions about Mr. Hamada. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And asked whether he testified that whether anything Mr. Depp said or anything Mr. Waldman said had anything to do with their initial decision not to exercise the option to Aquaman 2. Do you recall that testimony? Or that, those questions?
The questioning, yes.
Okay. Now, the testimony from Mr. Schnell tracked the 1.2 million tracers to January 2021, correct?
Objection leading.
Do you remember what month that was until?
Right. So when Mr. Schnell did his analysis, it was from April of 2020 to January 2021.
And when did Warner Brothers tell Amber Heard and her agents, they were not exercising her Aquaman 2 contract.
It was in February of 2021.
All right. And what, if anything, did Mr. Hamada say about whether the reason they did that was because of the 1.2 million negative social media tweets and Instagrams and other communications?
Objection, no foundation.
Had any impact?
Sustained. Next question.
Are you aware of whether he said anything about that?
I recall in the Warner Brothers file.
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
Do you know whether that had any impact?
Objection, hearsay.
I'm asking now. She's allowed to rely on hearsay.
Sustain the objection. Next question.
All right. You were asked a whole lot of questions about the different comparables. And so I'm just going to go to this again. Of all the different movies, of all of those comparables, which movie was the highest grossing of all of them?
Again, I believe it's Aquaman. I mean, everybody talks about Aquaman being one of the highest, if not the highest grossing films. Certainly the highest DC comic film or in that superhero world. But again, I don't want to say it was the highest, but I think it was very close to it.
Do you know whether Walter Hamada admits it was the highest grossing DC film?
Yes, he said that, yes.
Okay. So when you're looking at all the comparables, what, if any, relevance is there to the degree of success of that DC superhero movie?
Objection, foundation.
She can speak to that, Your Honor.
That's the foundation.
Do you know the answer to that question? Do you know?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
I forgot it now, I have to admit. Okay, so let's go backwards. So what if, do you know whether it makes a difference, whether how successful that DC superhero movie is in what types of films they'll be able to get in the future?
Objection, foundation.
I'm asking the foundation.
If you want to ask the foundation, go ahead.
I'm sorry, that's what I thought I was asking. Do you know whether that plays any role, the degree of success?
Customarily, when a film...
Objection, foundation.
Ask her how she knows.
How do you know?
In 25 years of being in the film industry, it's customary for when a movie does such an extraordinary amount at the box office, it shines a very bright light on the actors, especially if they're in lead roles. And it's customary that they will get, not customary, it is, I don't want to use the word standard, but it is very frequent that a star in a movie that has performed so well at the box office and with a role model character that Mira was, that she would have gotten other roles and worked quite a bit afterwards, and that movie would have helped her career. I mean, that's no question.
Okay. And with all these comparables, when you gave the range to this jury of 45 to 50 million in estimating this over this period of time, did you put Amber Heard's estimated damages ranges above all those other comparables?
No, again, I was very specific in using the actual negotiated rates that Ms. Heard's agents were able to get for her in that contract and use that as a precedent. So again, I always wanted to be grounded in what Ms. Heard actually was in contract for and what her agents negotiated. And I used that as the baseline for the financial numbers of her loss. I used the comparable actors to show how consistently they all worked and how their careers moved forward after being in a box office.
You were asked about Disney and the Pirates 6 again. What, if any, knowledge do you have of whether Disney is willing to pay Mr. Depp $300 million and 1 million alpacas?
Objection, no
star?
foundation.
I'm asking her, what, if anything, does she know about whether Disney is...
If you can lay a foundation.
Okay. Did you listen to or did you read the Disney testimony in this case?
I did, yes.
All right. What do you recall Disney saying about whether they were willing to pay Mr. Depp $300 million and give him 1 million alpacas?
They would not be willing to pay $300 million and give him alpacas.
Thank you. You were asked about the defecation. What, if any, recollection or knowledge do you have about whether that social media negative campaign that you've testified had the words defecation in it or poop.
Objection, no foundation.
I know that the word poop and the hashtag poop is used.
Okay. Was that in
Move-
any of the
move to
ones you
strike.
found?
Sustain the objection,
Okay.
move to strike. Next question.
Okay. In your review of the social media campaigns and the negative social media campaigns that you testified to with this jury, that include the L'Oreal, that include the WME, that include Mr. Snell, and include what you've done, what, if any, recollection do you have of how many of those that are influencing your connections to the defamation statements include the words poop or defecation?
Objection, compound.
Overrule.
I don't believe poop was one of the hashtags that was connected to the statements.
Okay, thank you. You were asked about the time period between the defamatory statement, between the release of Aquaman 2 in December 2018.
Aquaman 1.
Aquaman 1, thank you, and the defamatory statements that were in April 2020 and June 2020. Do you recall that testimony?
I remember that questioning, yes.
Okay. During that time, were you aware of whether Aquaman 2 was in discussions with Amber Heard about scheduling the filming of Aquaman 2?
In the period between the statements and...
Before. I'm going before.
Okay,
I'm
sorry.
talking about the period of time when they released Aquaman 1
Okay.
and the April 8th, first of the defamatory statements.
Right.
Do you know whether whether Warner Brothers was in discussions already with Amber Heard about scheduling her for Aquaman 2?
Objection, hearsay.
Do you know? I'm asking her whether you know.
I'll sustain it as a hearsay.
Okay. Do you have knowledge of whether Aquaman was in discussions with Amber during that period?
Objection, hearsay.
I don't know how to. I'm asking
Ask her
foundation.
foundation.
Right. How would you know?
Well, Amber received an early draft of the script. Amber's agents were in discussions.
Objection, hearsay.
I think she can say that.
Sustained.
Okay. What is, in your experience, based on getting scripts, what does that mean? I'm asking for experience.
In my experience with the movie as high profile as something like Aquaman, they keep the scripts very tight. You know, they don't let anybody read them. They're numbered. They have your name on it. So if you're getting a script for a movie such as Aquaman that's kept tightly close to the vest, if you will, by the studio, you are going to, they want you to be in the movie. Otherwise, they would never give you the script.
Okay. And so if a script was given to Amber Heard before the first April 8, 2020 defamatory statement, what would that suggest?
Objection,
Based on your knowledge that you've just testified to.
Objection, speculation.
It's not speculation. Your Honor.
Overruled.
Again, if she got the script, they were going to use her in the movie. That was their plan.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is this witness subject to recall?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so you're still an expert, so you can have a seat in the courtroom. I'm
still
sorry.
okay.
You still are.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has come to the end of our day. All right, so please do not do any outside research tonight, and don't talk with anybody about the case, okay? And we'll see you in the morning, bright and early at 9 o'clock, right? Okay, thank you. All right, just a few planning notes, okay? After testimony tomorrow, and we excuse the jury, we'll go ahead and have the proffers that you requested, Mr. Rottenborn. We'll do those tomorrow after, is that okay? Does that sound good? All right, we'll do those right after, like right now, tomorrow. Okay, that should give you, with all with the proffers that you need to do for the record, okay? All right, and then whenever all the testimony is done, possibly at this point it would be Thursday afternoon after the jury is excused. We'll go over the remaining jury instructions. I have 3 under advisement. We'll take up those, and we'll also, if there's any other from the evidence this week that we need to talk about, we can discuss those as well after the jury's gone on Thursday evening, or if earlier, if the evidence is done before then, okay? And just as times up to this minute, the plaintiff has used 45 hours and 24 minutes. The defendant has used 57 hours and 6 minutes, which means the plaintiff has left 15 hours and 51 minutes, and the defendant has 4 hours and 9 minutes left, okay? So that's where we're at. All right, anything else for this evening?
Your Honor, the last witness, it appears that is on the plaintiff's witness list is Mr. Depp, and I was just hoping we would get an answer
You mean
as to what.
defendant's witness list?
Yeah, defendant's witness list.
I don't know. Are
was
you
hoping
still
to get an answer.
changing witness? I mean, I'm not sure.
We're discussing.
Okay. Make a decision in the morning, okay? All right, everybody have a good evening. All right, thank you.